Look at what you have done! You are finished!
No, please stop! I beg you!
A MARSOC team sergeant looked at her dog and said, "Put it down, sweetheart. We're not running a petting zoo." 11 days later, that same sergeant was carrying that same dog, 70 pounds of burned Belgian Malinois, across 800 meters of open Syrian desert on one good arm, because his other arm was hanging from his shoulder by what the trauma surgeon would later describe as approximately 3 tendons and a prayer. The dog had just pulled 3 of his men out of a burning MRAP. One of them was him. He carried that dog the whole way, and he did not say a single word the entire time. He has not, in the 6 years since, ever told the woman who handled that dog what he was thinking on that walk. But every November, he drives 12 hours to her house and sits on her kitchen floor for 2 hours, and he brings a ribeye in a cooler on the passenger seat, and the ribeye is not for her. Stay with me. My name is Hatch. I spent 30 years in the United States Marine Corps. I retired in 2016 as a sergeant major. I live in Beaufort, South Carolina, in a house with a screened porch and 2 yellow Labrador retrievers named Buck and Sergeant. Buck is 12. Sergeant is 9. They are not working dogs. They have never pulled anyone out of anything except a bag of dog food when the lid was left off. But I know what it is to live with a dog. I know the particular silence of a house with a dog in it, and the particular silence of a house after a dog is gone. I have lived in both kinds of houses. Most of you who are listening to this have lived in both kinds of houses too. I am telling you this at the top because the story I am about to tell you is, in part, a story about a dog. And I do not want you to think I am telling it from a distance. On my kitchen table tonight, I have one document. It is a photocopy. The original is in a filing cabinet at the Department of Defense Military Working Dog Veterinary Services Center, Lackland Air Force Base, San Antonio, Texas. The photocopy was sent to me by a gunnery sergeant who let me have it on the condition that I read it on air, in full, without paraphrasing, exactly once. It is a single page. It is a medical intake log. The date on it is November 16th, 2018. The subject identifier is MWDVX, M412, Belgian Malinois, male, sable, for years 6 months, handler SSGT Janik, Carolina M. I am going to read you the body of the log now. I am going to read it the way it is written, which is in the flat, declarative, almost bored language that veterinary technicians use when the animal in front of them is in a state that anyone with feelings would not be able to write about in a flat way. The technicians write that way because they have to. If they wrote it the way they felt it, they would not be able to come to work the next morning. Bear that in mind. Patient presents with second-degree thermal burns covering approximately 18% of body surface area. Affected regions: dorsal muzzle, severe; bilateral nasal planum, severe, with partial cartilage exposure; bilateral forelimb metacarpals and digital pads, severe; full pads sloughing on left forelimb, partial right; ventral throat, moderate; bilateral penny margins, moderate. Patient ambulatory but non-weight bearing on left forelimb. Patient hyperalert, hypersalivating, refusing food and water. Handler present, refuses to leave. Handler appears uninjured but has significant soot deposition on uniform and exposed skin. Second-degree burns to right hand consistent with handling smoldering material without protective glove. Handler declined medical evaluation, stating, quote, "I'm fine. Work on the dog," end quote. Patient response to handler voice. Tracking, tail movement, attempts to rise. Patient response to handler hand on shoulder, settles. Patient will not settle without handler contact. Recommend handler remain in treatment area throughout debridement. Recommend immediate 4-fluid therapy, broad-spectrum antibiotic prophylaxis, opioid analgesia, sedation for debridement, of necrotic tissue. Long-term prognosis, guarded but favorable for survival. Permanent scarring expected. Functional recovery expected within 6 to 9 months, pending absence of infection. Patient is a valuable asset and demonstrated exceptional working drive during the action that produced these injuries. Recommend full recovery effort. Estimated cost of full reconstructive and rehabilitation course, $14,200. That is the document. I want you to notice one thing in it before we go on. Handler declined medical evaluation, stating, quote, "I'm fine. Work on the dog," end quote. The handler was not fine. The handler had second-degree burns on her right hand because she had spent the previous 90 minutes carrying a burning piece of vehicle interior off of her dog's face with her bare hand, because the only fire-retardant glove she could find had a hole in the palm. She had not told anyone. She had said, "I'm fine," and she had meant fix him first. The triage nurse at the FOB clinic the next morning would put her in a chair, look at her hand, look at her face, and say, "Staff Sergeant, you should have come in last night." The handler would say, "I know. I'm sorry." The triage nurse would say, "You're not sorry. You did the right thing. But next time come in after." The handler would say, "Roger that, ma'am." And the triage nurse would write in the patient notes. In handwriting, I have also seen in photocopy. Patient is one of those. You are not going to change her. Treat the hand and let her go. The handler's name is Staff Sergeant Carolina Janik, United States Marine Corps. People who know her call her Carly. The Marines who served with her in MARSOC Special Operations Team 23 in 2018 also called her Carly, although they did not start calling her that until day 24, and the day they started is a day I am going to tell you about. The dog's name is Vex. Vex is short for nothing. Vex is just Vex. His official identifier is M412. He is a Belgian Malinois. He is now 10 years old. He sleeps on a green corduroy couch in a single-story brick house in Hubert, North Carolina, about 15 minutes from the back gate of Camp Lejeune. He has a stainless steel food bowl on the kitchen floor with the letters VX engraved on the rim and the serial number M412 engraved on the bottom. The engraving was done at a trophy shop in Jacksonville, North Carolina, in March of 2019 by a man named Earl who would not take payment when he heard what the bowl was for. Earl is 68 years old. He served in Vietnam. He has, on the wall of his shop, a photograph of a German shepherd named Rudy who was his dog in 1968. I will come back to Earl. This is the story of Staff Sergeant Carolina Janik and a dog named Vex and a Master Sergeant named Mark Devereaux. It is a story about a thing a man said one time and what he did about it for the rest of his life. It is a story about 9 minutes in the Syrian desert in November of 2018. It is a story about a ribeye steak in a cooler. It is also, like most of these stories, a story about silence. The kind of silence that holds more than words do. Let's start at the beginning, which, in this case, is a kitchen in Hamtramck, Michigan, in the winter of 1996. Hamtramck is a city of 2.5 square miles entirely surrounded by the city of Detroit. If you have never heard of it, that is reasonable. Most Americans have not. It was settled in the early 20th century by Polish immigrants who came to work at the Dodge main plant, and for most of the 20th century, it was the most Polish city in America by percentage. By the 1990s, it had begun to change. Bangladeshi, Yemeni, and Bosnian families were moving in. The Polish bakeries were starting to share blocks with halal butchers. But on the block where Carolina Janik grew up, on Canif Street between Joseph Compound and Conant, the language you heard on the sidewalk in 1996 was still mostly Polish. The Janik house was a 2-story wood frame, painted pale yellow, with a screened front porch and a small backyard that contained a rusted swing set and a single apple tree that produced sour apples nobody ate. The house was owned, free and clear, by Carolina's maternal grandmother, Helena, who had bought it in 1972 with cash she had saved over 14 years of cleaning offices at the General Motors building in downtown Detroit. Helena lived on the second floor. Carolina, her mother Agnieszka, and her father Tom lived on the first. Agnieszka Janik, Carolina's mother, had come to the United States from Gdansk in 1988 at the age of 22 on a student visa to study accounting at Wayne State University. She had met Tom Janik in a Greek diner on Woodward Avenue 6 months after she arrived. Tom was a third-generation Polish-American whose family had stopped speaking Polish around 1945. His grandfather had decided, after the war, that his children would speak only English because the world was going to be in English from now on, and you did not get ahead in America by speaking the language your mother cried in. Tom understood maybe 20 words of Polish when he met Agnieszka. He understood about 200 by the time they were married, 18 months later. He understood about 1,000 by the time Carolina was born in 1993. He never became fluent. Agnieszka did not push him. She said, once, to a friend of hers from the Polish church, "He tries. That is enough. The girl will be fluent. That is enough for the family." Tom Janik worked for the Detroit Police Department, but not as a police officer. He worked at the Detroit Public Safety Headquarters as an emergency dispatcher. 911. He wore a tie to work every day. He carried a leather binder with a pin clipped to it. He had a soft voice, low and clear, the kind of voice that does not rise even when the person on the other end of the line is screaming. The kind of voice that, when you hear it in your earpiece at 3 in the morning while your apartment is on fire or your husband is on the kitchen floor not breathing, makes you believe, against all available evidence, that everything is going to be all right. This is an important detail. I want you to hold it. Carolina Janik did not grow up with a silent father. She grew up with a father whose entire profession was speaking calmly to strangers in the worst moments of their lives. She grew up listening to a voice that did not flinch. The voice was the family's primary teaching tool. When Carolina, at the age of 6, fell off her bicycle on the sidewalk outside the house and skinned both knees badly enough that the blood ran into her socks, she did not cry. She walked into the house. She found her father in the kitchen, at the table, reading the Detroit Free Press. She held up her bloody hands. She said, "Daddy, I need help." Tom Janik put down the newspaper. He looked at the knees. He said, in the same voice he used at work, "Okay, kiddo, sit down. We are going to wash this. Then we are going to put something on it. Then it is going to sting for about 10 minutes. Then it is going to be fine. Can you do that with me?" Carolina, age 6, said, "Yes, Daddy." She did not cry through any of it. Agnieszka, when she came home from work that evening and saw the bandages, said in Polish, "Caroline, what happened?" Carolina, in Polish, said, "I fell. Daddy helped me. I did not cry." Agnieszka looked at Tom across the kitchen. Tom shrugged. Agnieszka said, in Polish, "She is going to be like you. She is going to be too calm. That is going to be a problem someday." Tom, who understood the sentence completely, said in English, "Or it's going to save her life." Agnieszka said, in English, "Or both." Both, as it turned out, was the correct answer. Carolina was an only child. This was not by plan. Agnieszka had wanted 3 children. After Carolina, there were 2 pregnancies that did not survive past the first trimester, and after the second one, in 1997, the doctor at Henry Ford Hospital sat Agnieszka down and explained, in a kind voice, that there would not be more. Agnieszka came home, went into the bedroom, closed the door, and did not come out for 2 days. On the 3rd day she came out, made breakfast, and did not speak about it again. Carolina, age 4, did not understand what had happened. She only understood that her mother had been sad and was now not sad, and that the house was going to have one child in it forever, and that the child was her. Helena, the grandmother upstairs, became, by mutual unspoken family agreement, Carolina's second parent. Helena was 68 in 1997. She had a small pension from her cleaning job and a small Social Security check and a habit of cooking everything from scratch, and a parakeet named Felek, who lived in a cage by the window and who Helena spoke to in Polish all day long, as if he were a person. Helena taught Carolina to bake bread, to make pierogi, to play a card game called Tyziak that is the Polish equivalent of Pinochle and that nobody under 60 plays anymore. Helena also did one other thing, which I want to tell you about specifically because it matters later. Helena had a small black and white photograph on her dresser. The photograph was of a dog, a German shepherd, ears up, sitting on the cobblestones of what looked like a city street, with a man in a Polish military uniform crouched beside him. The man in the photograph was Helena's father, Jerzy. The dog's name was Rex. The year was 1938. Jerzy was a non-commissioned officer in the Polish Border Protection Corps. Rex was his service dog. In September of 1939, when the Germans invaded Poland, Jerzy was killed in the first week of the war. Rex survived. He was taken in by a neighbor and lived to the age of 14. Helena, who had been 7 years old in 1939, remembered the dog more clearly than she remembered her father. She had told Carolina, sitting on the edge of the bed in the upstairs bedroom when Carolina was 5 years old, the dog stayed. The dog stayed when everything else went away. Remember that. Dogs stay. Carolina, at age 5, did not fully understand what her grandmother meant. She would understand later. She would understand, in particular, on a specific night in the Syrian desert in November of 2018, when a 4-year-old Belgian Malinois with second-degree burns on his face would refuse to lie down on his side until she put her hand on his shoulder and would then close his eyes and exhale once and let her work. Dogs stay. Helena had been right. Carolina started volunteering at the Hamtramck Animal Shelter at the age of 7. Her mother had to drive her because the shelter was on the other side of the city, off Caniff near the cemetery. Carolina would spend Saturday mornings cleaning kennels, refilling water bowls, walking the small dogs in the gravel yard behind the building, and sitting on the concrete floor in front of the kennel of any dog who was afraid of people. She would not try to touch the afraid dogs. She would just sit there. Sometimes she would read a book out loud. The shelter director, a woman in her 50s named Beverly Kowalski, would later tell a reporter from the Hamtramck Review in 2019 for a small article that ran on page 7. Carly Janik was the most patient child I ever worked with. She had the dog sense at 7 that most adults never get. She knew how to be still. That is the whole job with a frightened animal. Just be still. Most people can't do it. She could. When Carolina was 9, she asked her parents for a dog. Tom said yes immediately. Agnieszka said no. The disagreement was the only sustained argument Carolina ever witnessed between her parents in 18 years of living in the same house. It lasted 4 days. The compromise, on day 5, was a cat. They got a cat from the shelter, a black and white short hair, 2 years old, named, by Helena, Bandita, Polish for bandit. Bandita lived to the age of 17 and died in 2014 while Carolina was at Marine combat training. Tom called her on the company phone to tell her. Carolina cried in the company office for about 3 minutes, then washed her face in the sink, then went back out to formation. Her drill instructor, Sergeant Williams, saw the redness around her eyes and said nothing. Carolina did, eventually, get her dog. She got him at the age of 10. He was a beagle mix, 8 months old. Owner surrendered to the shelter because the family had moved to an apartment that did not allow dogs. Carolina named him Pies, which is Polish for dog. This was a joke that Helena found extremely funny, and that Tom found mildly annoying, and that Agnieszka pretended not to find anything, but secretly thought was the funniest thing her daughter had ever done. Pies lived for 13 years. He died in 2015 when Carolina was in MWD school at Lackland. Tom called her on a Sunday. Carolina took the call in the barracks parking lot. She listened. She said, "Thanks, Dad. Thanks for being with him." She hung up. She walked to the kennels. She found the dog she was working with that week, a green Belgian Malinois who had not yet been named, and she sat down on the concrete in front of his kennel and put her hand on the chain link and stayed there for about an hour. The kennel master, a master sergeant named Lopez, walked by, saw her, understood without being told, and walked away. That is the kind of person Carolina Janik is. I want you to understand it before we go any further. She is the kind of person who, when something hurts, goes to a dog. I want to tell you one more story from before she was a Marine. I want to tell you about a night in the kitchen of the Janik house in Hamtramck, Michigan, in the early spring of 2007. Carolina was 13. Tom Janik, in addition to his job at the Detroit Public Safety Headquarters, was a hobbyist. His hobby was police and emergency radio scanning. He had a Uniden scanner the size of a hardcover book sitting on the kitchen counter next to the toaster. It was plugged in 24 hours a day. The volume was usually turned down low. The scanner cycled through Detroit police frequencies, Detroit fire frequencies, Hamtramck Police, Highland Park Police, EMS Dispatch, Wayne County Sheriff. Tom listened to it the way other men listened to baseball games. He had grown up in a house where his own father had done the same thing. Tom's father had been a Detroit firefighter, retired in 1986, dead of a heart attack in 1991, and the sound of the scanner was, for Tom, the background sound of being home. He did not turn it off because turning it off would have made the house too quiet. Agnieszka tolerated the scanner. She had asked, in the early years of the marriage, if it could be moved to the basement. Tom had said yes. It had stayed in the basement for about 3 weeks. Then it had come back upstairs. Agnieszka had not asked again. She had decided, the way wives sometimes decide, that this was the cost of the man, and the man was worth the cost. Carolina had grown up with the scanner in the background of every meal, every homework session, every winter evening reading on the couch. She had learned the codes the way other children learn nursery rhymes. 1050 was a traffic accident. Signal 9 was a domestic disturbance. Code 3 was lights and sirens. 4150 was a person down. She knew the dispatchers' voices. She knew which sectors of Detroit were the busy ones. She knew that around 2 in the morning the calls got worse, fewer of them, but worse, and that the dispatchers' voices got quieter, not louder, when things got bad. Tom had explained this to her when she was about 11, sitting at the kitchen table eating cereal late at night because she could not sleep. When something is small, you can be loud, he had said. When something is big, you have to be quiet. Otherwise, the person on the other end gets bigger too. That is the whole job. Carolina had nodded. She had filed it. The night I want to tell you about was a Tuesday in March, around 11:30 at night. Carolina had a science test the next morning, and she had been studying at the kitchen table. Agnieszka was already in bed. Helena was upstairs asleep. Tom was sitting across the table from Carolina, drinking coffee, half reading a paperback. The scanner was on the counter behind Tom, volume low. The scanner clicked. A dispatcher's voice came on. The voice belonged to a woman Tom worked with named Denise. Tom recognized it. He turned his head slightly. He did not turn up the volume. He did not need to. Carolina, who had also recognized the voice, looked up from her notes. Denise said, in the calm, even voice that all of them used, "All units, signal 9, possible 4150, 1427 Pulaski, repeat 1427 Pulaski. Caller is a female juvenile, requesting immediate response. Tom did not move. He took a sip of coffee. He set the mug down. A patrol unit answered. Dispatch, Unit 23 responding. ETA 4 minutes. Denise said, Copy, Unit 23, for minutes. Caller is still on the line. I am keeping her on the line. There was a pause. Then Denise's voice came back on, slightly softer, talking now not to the patrol unit, but on a different channel that was bleeding through, to the caller herself. Sweetheart, you are doing so good. The officers are 4 minutes away. Can you tell me where in the house you are right now? Carolina looked at her father. Tom was looking at the scanner. His face had not changed, but his right hand, on the table, had gone flat. Palm down, fingers spread. A child's voice came through the scanner. Maybe 9 years old, maybe 10. The voice said, I am in the closet in my mommy's room. I am under the coats. Denise said, That is very smart. You stay right there. Do not come out until you hear a police officer say your name. Did I tell you my name? My name is Denise. What is your name, sweetheart? The child's voice said a name. I am not going to tell you the name. It is not mine to give. Denise said the name back to the child, slowly, gently. She said, That is a beautiful name. You are doing so good. Name. The officers are 3 minutes away now. 3 minutes. Can you count to 100 for me? Slowly. Out loud. Start now. The child started counting. 1, 2, 3, 4. Carolina was watching her father. Her father was watching the scanner. He still had not moved. He still had not turned up the volume. He still had his hand flat on the table. The child counted. 15, 16, 17. Then the child's voice stopped. There was a sound. The sound was distant, but it came through clearly. It was a man's voice, shouting. Then another sound. Carolina, at the age of 13, sitting at her kitchen table in Hamtramck, Michigan, with a science textbook open in front of her, heard a sound through her father's police scanner that she would, 25 years later, still be able to describe to a chaplain at Camp Lejeune in 3 exact words. She told the chaplain, in 2022, it was wet. The chaplain, who had been a Navy chaplain for 19 years and who had heard people describe a great many sounds, did not ask her to elaborate. He nodded. He wrote the 3 words down. He did not look at her face when he wrote them. The sound on the scanner lasted maybe 2 seconds. Then there was silence. Then Denise's voice came back on. The voice was exactly the same as it had been before. Calm, even, quiet. The voice said, Name, name, can you hear me? Name, talk to me, sweetheart. The officers are 90 seconds out. 90 seconds. Name, are you there? There was no answer. Denise said, Unit 23, dispatch, expedite. Expedite. I have lost contact with the caller. Repeat, lost contact with the caller. Expedite. Unit 23 said, Dispatch, 23, we are 60 seconds out, lights on, coming in hot. Tom Janik reached across the table. He put his hand on top of Carolina's hand. He did not say anything. His face still had not changed, but his hand was warm and his hand was steady and his hand was on hers. Carolina, at 13, looked at her father's hand on her hand. She looked at her father's face. She said, in a small voice, Daddy. Did she? Tom said, I don't know, kiddo. Carolina said, Why is Denise still talking to her if? Tom said, Because we don't know. We don't know yet. Until we know, we talk. The talking is the job, even when there might not be anyone on the other end. Especially then. The scanner kept going. Denise kept talking. Name. Sweetheart. The officers are at your house now. They are coming in the front door. They are saying your name. Can you hear them? Name. There was, finally, after about 40 seconds, another voice on the scanner. A patrol officer. The patrol officer said, Dispatch, 23. We are inside. We have one adult male subject down, GSW to the head, self-inflicted, weapon recovered. We have one adult female down in the kitchen, multiple GSW, deceased. We are searching for the juvenile. There was a pause. About 10 seconds. Then the patrol officer's voice again. Different. Lighter. Dispatch, 23. We have the juvenile. Female, age 9, in the master bedroom closet, under coats, unharmed, talking to us. She wants to know if she can come out. Denise's voice came on. 23. Dispatch, copy. Tell her yes. Tell her Denise said yes. Tell her she did so good. The patrol officer said, Roger, dispatch. We'll tell her. 23 out. The scanner went quiet. It cycled to a different channel. A traffic stop somewhere in Highland Park. A different dispatcher's voice. Routine. Tom Janik kept his hand on Carolina's hand for another full minute. Then he lifted it. He stood up. He walked to the counter. He turned the scanner off. He had not turned the scanner off in the kitchen, in Carolina's memory, ever before. He came back to the table. He sat down. He said, Kiddo, I want to tell you something. You can ask me about this any time. Tomorrow. Next week. Next year. You can ask me about it for the rest of my life. I will tell you whatever you want to know about how this works. But I want you to know one thing tonight, before you go to bed, because I do not want you to lie awake about it. Carolina said, Okay, Daddy. Tom said, The little girl in the closet. She lived. Because she stayed in the closet. Because she stayed quiet. Because she counted. Because Denise was on the line. The talking did not save her. The talking kept her in the closet. That is what the talking does. It keeps the person where they are safe until somebody can get there. Do you understand? Carolina, at 13, said, Yes, Daddy. Tom said, The mother. Denise could not save the mother. Denise was on the line with the daughter, not the mother. We do not save everyone. We save who we can reach. We save who is listening. That is the job. Carolina said, Did Denise know about the mother before? Tom said, She knew it was possible. We always know it is possible. We do the job anyway, because the job is not knowing whether it will work. The job is doing it because not doing it is worse. Carolina sat at the kitchen table for a long time. She did not finish studying. She did not cry. She closed her textbook eventually, and she went upstairs, and she got into bed, and she lay there in the dark, and she did not sleep until almost 4 in the morning. She did not ask her father about it the next day. She did not ask him about it the next week. She did not ask him about it for 11 years. The next time she would mention that night to her father, she would be 24 years old, and she would be sitting on the same kitchen floor of the same house in Hamtramck on a Christmas morning in 2017, and she would say to him, Dad, the thing with the scanner. When I was 13, I remember it. I just want you to know I remember it. Tom Janik, who would be 61 years old by then and who would be 6 months from retirement, would put down his coffee and he would say, I know you do, kiddo. I knew you would. That would be the entire conversation. But on that night in 2007, lying in her bed in the dark, 13 years old, she made a decision. She did not know she was making it at the time. Most decisions of that kind are not made consciously. They are made in the body before they reach the mind. The decision was this. I am going to be a person who is on the line. I am going to be the voice that keeps the other person in the closet. I do not know yet what kind of closet. I do not know yet what kind of line. But I am going to be on the line. She would not have words for the decision for several more years. The words would come, eventually, in a different city, in a different room, in front of a different kind of voice, a recruiter's voice, 6 years later, in the spring of 2013. We will get there. Carolina Janik graduated from Hamtramck High School in June of 2012. She was 19 years old. She had a B+ average and no plans. She had applied, half-heartedly, to Wayne State and Eastern Michigan, and had been accepted to both. She did not enroll at either. She told her parents she wanted a year off to think. Agnieszka was not pleased. Tom said, "Let her think, Aga. Thinking is a good thing to do at 19. Most people do not." Agnieszka said, in Polish, "Most people are not paying rent." Tom said, in English, "She lives here. She is not paying rent. She is thinking." Agnieszka let it go. Carolina spent the year working at a veterinary clinic on Joseph Compound, doing reception and kennel cleaning, making $9.25 an hour. She thought. She did not arrive at any conclusions. She watched dogs come in and dogs go out. She held a boxer named Roxy while she was being euthanized for lymphoma in February of 2013 because the owner could not bear to be in the room. Roxy was 11 years old. Carolina sat on the floor with Roxy's head in her lap, and she stroked the soft place between Roxy's eyes, and she said, in Polish, very quietly, "Dobry pies, dobry pies, dobry pies, good dog, good dog, good dog," until the dog's body went heavy. The vet, a woman named Dr. Chun who had known Carolina since Carolina was 10, watched her do it. Dr. Chun said afterward, in the back office, "Carly, you are wasted on reception. You should go to vet school. I will write you a recommendation." Carolina said, "Thank you, Dr. Chun. I am thinking about it." She was not thinking about it. She was thinking about something else, and she did not have the words for it yet. 3 weeks later, on a Tuesday morning in March of 2013, Carolina drove her father's 1998 Buick Century from Hamtramck to a strip mall on 8 Mile Road, in the part of Detroit that was not technically Detroit anymore, and she walked into a Marine Corps recruiting station. She had not told her parents she was going. She had not told anyone. She had not made an appointment. She had simply gotten in the car and driven there, the way a person does something when the decision was made years ago and the body is just now getting around to executing it. The recruiter on duty that morning was a staff sergeant named Reginald Brooks. 41 years old, 23 years in the Corps, 3 deployments to Iraq, 1 to Afghanistan. He was sitting at his desk eating a bagel. He looked up when Carolina walked in. He set the bagel down. He stood up. He had been a recruiter for 4 years, and he had developed an instinct for the ones who were going to enlist and the ones who were going to walk out, and he could usually tell within about 3 seconds. He looked at Carolina in her gray sweater and her jeans and her cheap winter boots, with her hair pulled back in a low ponytail and no makeup and a slightly tired expression, and he thought, "This one is going to enlist." He was right. He said, "Good morning. I'm Staff Sergeant Brooks. How can I help you?" Carolina said, "I want to be a Marine. I want to handle dogs." Staff Sergeant Brooks paused. He looked at her for about 2 seconds. Then he sat back down. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. He said, "Sit down. Tell me your name. Tell me why." Carolina sat down. She said, "Carolina Janik. From Hamtramck. I am 19. I have wanted to do this for 6 years. I want to handle dogs because I am good with dogs, and because I want to be useful, and because I want to be on the line. That is the best way I can say it right now. I do not know if it is the right way." Brooks said, "On the line." Carolina said, "Yes, sir." Brooks said, "Don't call me sir. I work for a living." Carolina said, "Yes, Staff Sergeant." Brooks said, "On the line. Like, on the front line." Carolina said, "No, Staff Sergeant. On the radio line. The line where the person on the other end is. The line that keeps them in the closet until somebody can get to them. My father is a 911 dispatcher. He has been on the line for 31 years. I want to be on a different kind of line. With a dog. I do not know how to say it better than that. I am sorry." Brooks looked at her. He picked up the bagel. He put it down again. He said, "Ms. Janik, do not apologize. That is the best answer I have heard from a recruit in 4 years. Most of them tell me they want to serve their country, which is fine, which is not wrong, but it is not specific. You are specific. Specific is what makes a Marine. He pulled out a folder. He opened it. He said, "Let me tell you what you are signing up for. MOS 5812 is Military Working Dog Handler. It is one of the smallest MOSs in the Corps. There are maybe 250 handlers at any given time. The school is at Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio. It is 12 weeks. About 60% of the people who start the school finish the school. You do not get to pick your dog. The dog is assigned to you. If the dog does not work out with you, you are reassigned. If you wash out of dog school, you become a regular MP. Are you prepared for that?" Carolina said, "I am prepared to do whatever I have to do to get to the dog school. If I wash out, I will reapply. I will keep reapplying." Brooks said, "That is not how it works." Carolina said, "Then I will not wash out, Staff Sergeant." Brooks said, Okay, Janik, let me run your numbers. We are going to need your high school transcript and your ASFOB. Have you taken the ASFOB?" Carolina said, "No, Staff Sergeant. I came here straight." Brooks said, "You came here straight. You did not even take the test first." Carolina said, "No, Staff Sergeant. I needed to come here first, to see if you were real. Now I will go take the test." Brooks laughed. It was a real laugh, the first one Carolina would hear from a Marine, although it would not be the last. He said, "Janik, go take the test. Come back next week. We will get you started." Carolina took the ASFOB the following Monday. She scored a 91. Brooks called her at home that evening to tell her. He said, in a voice that was trying to sound casual and failing, "Janik, you scored a 91. You can have any MOS in the Corps. Anyone, including officer track if you want to go to college first. I am required by the Marine Corps to tell you this. Do you want to consider any other MOS?" Carolina said, "No, Staff Sergeant." Brooks said, "Okay, I had to ask. I am going to put you in for 5812 with a guarantee. Most recruits do not get guarantees. You are getting one because of your score. The guarantee means you go to dog school after MCT, or you can break your contract. If you wash out of dog school, the guarantee is void and you become an MP. Are we clear?" Carolina said, "Yes, Staff Sergeant." "Thank you." Brooks said, "Janik, one more thing. I have done this for 4 years. I am going to tell you something off the record. I should not tell you this, but I am going to tell you. You are going to be good at this. I can hear it. Do not let anybody talk you out of it. The Corps will try, in small ways, because the Corps tries to break everyone in small ways to see what is left. What is left of you is going to be very good at this job. Do you hear me?" Carolina said, "Yes, Staff Sergeant. I hear you." She told her parents that night, at the kitchen table, with the scanner on the counter behind her father, turned low as always. Agnieszka stopped eating. She set down her fork. She said, in Polish, "Carolina." "No." Tom said nothing. He looked at his daughter. He looked at his wife. He looked at his daughter again. He picked up his coffee. He took a sip. He set it down. He said, in English, "Aga, she is going." Agnieszka said, in Polish, "Tom, she is 19. She is a child." Tom said, in English, "She is 19. She is not a child. She has been deciding this since she was 13. I have been watching her decide it. I did not say anything because it was not mine to say. It is hers. She is going." Agnieszka looked at Tom for a long time. Then she looked at Carolina. She said, in Polish, "You will write to your grandmother. Every week. Helena will not survive it otherwise." Carolina said, in Polish, "Yes, Mama. Every week." Agnieszka picked up her fork. She started eating again. She did not speak for the rest of the meal. After dinner, she went into the bedroom and closed the door, and Carolina could hear, through the wall, her mother crying. It was the second time in Carolina's life she had heard her mother cry. The first time had been in 1997 when the doctor had told her there would not be more children. Tom got up from the table. He walked to the bedroom door. He went in. He closed it behind him. Carolina did the dishes. She did not listen at the door. Helena, when told the news the following day, sat in her chair upstairs and was quiet for about a minute, and then she said, in Polish, "The dog will be a good dog. You will choose a good dog, or the dog will choose you. Either way." Carolina said, "Yes, Babsha." Helena said, "Bring him to meet me. When you have him, bring him here. I want to put my hand on his head before I die." Carolina said, "Yes, Babsha, I promise." She would, in fact, bring Vex to meet Helena in the spring of 2015, 2 years later, when Vex was still a young dog in early training and Carolina had a long weekend. Helena would put her hand on Vex's head. Vex, who did not know this woman and who had been trained to be wary of unknown civilians, would close his eyes under her hand and stand perfectly still for about 30 seconds. Helena would say, in Polish, to the dog, "Dobry pies." Dobry pies. Vex would lean into her hand. Carolina would watch it and would think, "This is going to be the dog. This one. He is going to be the one." She would be right. Helena would die 14 months later, in July of 2016, of a stroke, in her sleep, in her own bed on the second floor of the house on Canniff Street. She would be 84 years old. Carolina would fly home from Camp Pendleton for the funeral. She would be permitted to bring Vex, who was by then her assigned working dog, because she had requested it through her chain of command, and because her first sergeant, a man named Devereaux who understood the request without being told why, had approved it without questions. Vex would lie at Helena's casket during the visitation at the Polish church on Joseph Compow. The priest would not object. Several elderly Polish ladies would come up and pat the dog and say, in Polish, "Dobry pies," and the dog would tolerate it without moving. Carolina would not cry at the funeral. She would cry, later, in the parking lot of the funeral home, sitting in the back seat of her parents' car, with Vex in the seat next to her and his head in her lap. But that is later. We are still in the spring of 2013. Carolina shipped to Paris Island in June of 2013 for boot camp. She was assigned to 4th Battalion, the Women's Battalion, November Company, 3rd Platoon. Her senior drill instructor was a staff sergeant named Renato Williams, who I mentioned earlier and who I will mention again, because Staff Sergeant Williams is going to be important in a way Carolina did not know at the time and would not know for 10 years. I am going to keep the boot camp section brief because boot camp is, by design, the same for every Marine, and Carolina's boot camp was not unusual. She was, by the standards of recruits, easy to train. She did not complain. She did not cry where the drill instructors could see her. She did the physical work without performance and without complaint, because she had grown up walking dogs and lifting dog food bags and standing on concrete floors for hours at a time, and her body knew how to keep going when it was tired. Her run time was middle of the pack. Her rifle qualification was expert on her second try. Her academic scores were the second highest in the platoon. Her peer evaluations were strong but not exceptional. The other recruits liked her well enough, but they did not gravitate to her, because she was quiet, and because she did not seek attention, and because she spent most of her free moments writing letters to her grandmother in Polish online notebook paper, which the other recruits found mildly weird. There is one moment from Paris Island I want to tell you about, because it matters. It was week 8. The crucible was in 2 weeks. The platoon had been on a long humped march in heavy heat. July of 2013, the kind of South Carolina July that makes the air feel thick enough to chew. One of the recruits, a girl from Tennessee named Brittany Hodge, had fallen out about 2 miles from the end. She had not gone down. She had just stopped, dropped to one knee, and started crying. Hodge was not a strong recruit. She had been on the edge of being recycled for the previous 3 weeks. The drill instructors had been hard on her. Staff Sergeant Williams, who was strict but not cruel, had been watching Hodge carefully and had been giving her, in small private moments that the other recruits were not supposed to notice, additional coaching. When Hodge dropped to her knee, the platoon stopped. Williams walked back to her. Williams said quietly, "Hodge, get up. We are a mile and a half out. You are not quitting on me a mile and a half out." Hodge said, "Staff Sergeant, I cannot. I am sorry. I cannot." Williams said, "You can. You are going to. Get up." Hodge did not get up. Carolina Janik, who was in the second squad and who had been walking about 10 meters behind Hodge, stepped out of formation. She walked forward. She did not ask permission. She came up beside Hodge. She crouched down. She did not look at Williams. She said to Hodge in a quiet voice, "Hodge, listen to me. You do not have to walk. I will carry your pack. You walk without it. The staff sergeant will not see. I will take it now." Williams, standing 3 feet away, heard every word. Hodge said, "Janik, they will recycle me if." Janik said, "They will not. The staff sergeant has not seen anything. Stand up. Give me the pack." Hodge stood up. Janik took Hodge's pack. Janik put it on over her own pack, front-loaded, hanging from her chest, the way Marines carry a wounded buddy's gear in combat. Janik's own pack was 35 pounds. Hodge's was 32. Janik was carrying 67 pounds on a body that weighed 138 pounds in 96-degree heat, with a mile and a half to go. Williams said nothing. Williams turned around. Williams started walking. The platoon followed. Hodge walked. Janik walked. Janik did not say a word for the remaining mile and a half. She finished the march. She set both packs down. She drank water. She fell into formation. She did not look at Williams. Williams did not look at her. That night, in the squad bay, after lights out, Williams walked through the bay on her rounds. She stopped at Janik's rack. She bent down. She said, in a voice so quiet that only Janik could hear, "Janik." Janik said, "Yes, Staff Sergeant." Williams said, "What you did today, do not do it again. Not in front of me. Do you understand?" Janik said, "Yes, Staff Sergeant." Williams said, "Do you understand why?" Janik said, "Yes, Staff Sergeant. Because if you see it, you have to report it. And if you report it, Hodge gets recycled. So I should do it where you cannot see it." Williams was quiet for about 3 seconds. Then she said, "Janik, you are going to be a problem in the Corps. You are going to be a problem because you are going to do the right thing in the wrong way, and you are going to make your superiors choose between the rules and the right thing. Some of them are going to choose the rules. Some of them are going to choose you. You need to learn which is which before you get somebody killed. Do you hear me?" Janik said, "Yes, Staff Sergeant." Williams said, "Go to sleep." Williams walked away. Janik lay on her back in the rack and stared at the bottom of the rack above her and thought about what Williams had said. She did not fully understand it. She would understand it in stages over the next 5 years. She would understand it completely on day 24 of her deployment to Syria in 2018, when she would do the right thing in the wrong way and her team leader, a master sergeant named Devereaux, would have to choose between the rules and her. He would choose her, and the choosing would cost him, in a quiet way that nobody on the team would see for the rest of his career. But that is later. Hodge graduated boot camp. Hodge served 4 years in the Corps as a supply clerk at Camp Lejeune and got out as a lance corporal in 2017. Hodge lives in Knoxville now. She works at a Verizon store. She has 2 children. She does not, to my knowledge, know what Janik did for her on that march. Williams never told her. Janik never told her. Williams told me, in a phone call in October of 2023 from her front porch in Goose Creek, South Carolina, while I was researching this story. Williams retired as a sergeant major in 2021. She is 61 years old. She has 6 dogs of her own, all rescues, none of them working breeds, and she keeps a framed photograph of Janik and Vex on a shelf in her living room. The photograph was sent to her by Janik in 2019 with a one-line note on the back. The note says, "Staff Sergeant, I learned. Thank you. That is all." Williams told me on the phone, "Hatch, I have trained a lot of Marines. I have trained, by my count, somewhere north of 900 women. There were maybe 10 of them who I knew. The first week were going to be the kind of Marine that the rest of us would remember. Janik was one of those 10. The thing about her was the quiet. Most recruits, when they have the gift, they are loud about it. They want you to see it. Janik did not want you to see it. She wanted you to not see it, so she could keep doing it. That is the rare kind. That is the kind that makes a sergeant major, or gets killed, or both." I asked Williams if she was surprised when she heard, in 2019, about what Janik had done in Syria. Williams said, "Hatch, I was not surprised by 1 second of it. I was not surprised that she went into the fire. I was not surprised that she did not report her own injuries. I was not surprised that her team sergeant carried that dog 800 meters on one arm. I will tell you what I was surprised by. I was surprised that she let him. The Janik I trained would have tried to carry the dog herself. The fact that she let Devereaux carry the dog tells me she had grown up. That is what surprised me. The growing up part. The rest of it was always there." I asked Williams one more question. I asked her, what is the right way? The right way to do the right thing. Did Janik ever find it? Williams was quiet on the phone for a long time. Then she said, "Hatch, there is no right way. There is only the way you can live with afterward. Janik can live with what she did. That is the only test there is. The Corps wants you to think there is a right way and a wrong way and a manual that tells you which is which. The manual is a lie. The manual is for people who have never had to choose. Janik chose. She lives with the choosing. That is all anyone can do. I am going to leave that there." Janik graduated Paris Island in September of 2013. Her parents flew down for the ceremony. Helena was too frail by then to make the trip. Tom shook his daughter's hand on the parade deck and said, "Marine." That was the only word he said. Agnieszka hugged her daughter and did not let go for a long time and said, in Polish, "You did it. You did it. Now what?" Carolina said, in Polish, "Now the dogs, Mama." Agnieszka said, "Yes. Now the dogs." She went to Marine combat training at Camp Geiger in October. She finished MCT in December. She arrived at Lackland Air Force Base, San Antonio, Texas, for Military Working Dog Handler School on January 7, 2014. She was 20 years old. Lackland Air Force Base is, for reasons of history and inter-service agreement, the central training facility for all military working dogs in the United States Department of Defense. Every dog that serves in the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, Coast Guard, Secret Service, and several federal agencies is bred, raised, evaluated, trained, and certified at Lackland. The Military Working Dog Center occupies a fenced compound on the southwest corner of the base. It contains, at any given time, approximately 700 dogs in various stages of training. It smells, on a hot San Antonio afternoon, the way you would expect a place containing 700 working dogs in kennels to smell. Most handlers, on their first day, do not notice the smell after about 90 minutes. The ones who keep noticing it after a week generally do not finish the school. Carolina Janik noticed the smell on her first day. She decided, immediately, that she liked it. The school is 12 weeks. The first 4 weeks are classroom and obedience fundamentals. Handlers do not get assigned to a specific dog yet. They rotate through several dogs in the training pool. Weeks 5 through 8 introduce specialty work, patrol, detection, explosives or narcotics, and aggression control. Weeks 9 through 12 are integration, where each handler is assigned a permanent dog and the handler dog team is evaluated as a unit. About 40% of the people who start the school do not finish it. The most common reasons for washout are, in order, inability to handle the dog under stress, inability to read the dog's signals, and physical injury from a bite. The bite injuries are not, despite what civilians assume, usually from the dogs being aggressive. They are usually from handlers making mistakes during bite work training and getting bitten on the wrong part of the arm or the wrong part of the leg. Janik did not get bitten. Not once. Not in 12 weeks. The master sergeant who ran the bite work module, a man named Lopez who I mentioned earlier, told me on a phone call in November of 2023, Hatch, I have run bite work for 14 years. About 1 in every 30 handlers gets through the course without a bite. Janik was one of them. It is not luck. It is not coincidence. It is a particular kind of attention. The dog tells you, before he bites, that he is going to bite. There are about 6 signals. Most handlers learn to read 3 of them by graduation. Janik was reading all 6 by week 6. I asked her where she learned it. She said, quote, from a beagle named Pies and a shelter cat named Bandita, end quote. I had to look up what Pies meant. It means dog. In Polish, the dog was named Dog. That tells you everything about her. Janik was assigned her first working dog in week 9. He was a German shepherd named Bruno. Bruno was 4 years old, already certified, and was being rotated through new handlers because his previous handler had been medically discharged after a back injury. Bruno was, by all accounts, a difficult dog. He was dominant, he was selective about his handlers, and he had a history of refusing commands from anyone he had decided he did not respect. Lopez assigned Bruno to Janik specifically because he wanted to see what she would do. What she did was, on the first day, sit on the concrete floor of the kennel run for 40 minutes without speaking and without touching the dog. She had brought a small notebook. She wrote in it occasionally. Bruno watched her for the first 10 minutes. Then he lay down. Then he closed his eyes. Then, around minute 35, he got up, walked over to her, sniffed the notebook, sniffed her hand, and lay down again with his back against her leg. Janik did not move. She kept writing. After 40 minutes, she stood up, said quietly, Bruno, good boy. I will see you tomorrow, and walked out of the kennel. Lopez watched the whole thing from the observation window. He said to his second-in-command, a staff sergeant named Hayes, Hayes, we just watched a brand new handler get adopted by Bruno in 40 minutes. I have been doing this for 14 years. I have not seen that before. Make a note. Hayes made a note. The note is in Janik's training file. I have a photocopy. It says, in handwriting, handler dog match with Bruno achieved day 1, week 9. Method, passive presence. Duration, 40 minutes. Recommend monitoring. Janik graduated MWD school on March 28, 2014. She was honor graduate of her class of 23 handlers. She was assigned to Bruno permanently and posted to Camp Pendleton, California, with the 1st Marine Division's Military Police Battalion. She and Bruno worked together for 14 months. They did 1 deployment together. Okinawa, 6 months, base security, nothing dramatic. Bruno was retired in May of 2015 at the age of 5.5, earlier than usual, because of progressive hip dysplasia that had been getting worse despite treatment. Janik adopted him. He lived with her, off base, until he died in 2017 at the age of 7. She buried him in a friend's backyard in Oceanside, California, under a lemon tree, with a small flat stone that has his name and a single date on it. After Bruno's retirement, Janik was reassigned. She went back to Lackland for repairing. The dog she was assigned this time was a 2-year-old Belgian Malinois with the kennel designation M412, sable coat, black mask, 70 pounds at full weight. For years, 6 months from the day he was born to the day he would pull 3 Marines out of a burning MRAP in the Syrian desert. His call name, assigned at birth by the Lackland breeding program, was Vex. Janik met Vex on May 14, 2015. I want to describe the meeting because the meeting matters. The Lackland kennel master on duty that morning was a gunnery sergeant named Reyes. Reyes brought Janik to Kennel Block C, run number 17. Vex was in the run. He was lying on his side. He stood up when Reyes opened the gate. He did not bark. He did not approach. He stood at the back of the run and watched. Reyes said, "Janik, this is M412. Call name Vex. 2 years old. Certified patrol and explosives detection. Previous handler washed out at week 11 of integration. She could not control him. He is not aggressive. He is what we call selective. He picks who he works with. He has rejected 2 handlers already. If he rejects you, you get reassigned. Are you ready?" Janik said, "Yes, Gunny." Reyes said, "Okay. He is yours for the next 48 hours. Standard intro protocol. You feed him, you walk him, you do basic obedience, you do not push him. At the end of 48 hours, I will evaluate." Questions? Janik said, 1. Gunny. Can I sit in the run with him for the first hour? Before I do anything else? Reyes looked at her. Reyes said, "Janik, that is not standard protocol." Janik said, "I know, Gunny. I am asking permission to deviate from standard protocol." Reyes said, "Why?" Janik said, "Because he has been rejected twice. He is going to be expecting me to do something. I do not want him to expect anything from me for the first hour. I want him to get bored of expecting. Then I will start." Reyes was quiet for about 4 seconds. Then he said, "Permission granted. I will be back in 1 hour. Do not touch him. Do not speak to him. Just sit." Reyes left. Janik walked into the run. She closed the gate behind her. She sat down on the concrete, 3 feet inside the gate, facing the back wall, not facing the dog. She put her hands on her knees. She did not move. She did not speak. Vex stood at the back of the run for the first 6 minutes. Then he sat down. Then, around minute 20, he lay down. Around minute 35, he got up, walked in a slow circle around her. He was checking her from all sides, the way a Malinois will check an unfamiliar thing in his space. And then he came up behind her and sniffed the back of her head, very lightly, for about 2 seconds. Janik did not move. Vex walked around to her front. He stood directly in front of her, about 18 inches away, and looked at her face. Janik did not look at him. She looked at a point on the concrete about 2 feet beyond him. Vex stood there for about 40 seconds. Then he sat down. Then, after another full minute, he lay down, with his head on her foot. When Reyes came back at the 1-hour mark, he opened the gate quietly. He looked in. He looked at the dog with his head on Janik's foot. He looked at Janik, who had not moved in 59 minutes. He closed the gate again. He went to his office. He pulled Vex's file. He wrote, in the assignment section, "Handler Janik, CM, pairing confirmed. Bypass standard 48-hour evaluation. Recommend immediate operational integration." He signed it. He dated it. He walked back to the kennel. He opened the gate. He said, "Janik, you can stand up now. He's yours." Janik stood up slowly so as not to disturb the dog. Vex stood up with her. He looked up at her face for the first time. She looked down at him. She said, quietly, in Polish, "Dobry pies." Dobry pies. Vex's tail, which had not moved the entire hour, moved once. A single low, slow wag. That was the beginning. I am going to compress the next 3 years because compressing them is the only way to fit them. Janik and Vex trained at Lackland for an additional 8 weeks of integration after the initial pairing, longer than standard because Reyes decided to push Vex into advanced certifications, drag work, helicopter insertion, multi-language command response, and what is technically called handler-down protocol, which is the procedure by which a working dog continues to function if the handler is incapacitated. Vex passed every certification. He was, by the end of 2015, one of the highest-rated MWDs in the Marine Corps inventory. Janik also taught him 3 words in Polish. This was not authorized. Working dogs are trained in a standardized command language. Most American MWDs work on Dutch commands, which is a legacy of the Royal Netherlands Army's K9 program that supplied many of the original American working dogs in the 1970s. The 3 commands a handler is supposed to use are zit, sit, blige, stay, and brof, good. Janik used those commands in operational settings. But in the kennel, in private, when she was alone with Vex, she used Polish. Siadacz, sekacz, dobry, sit, wait, good. She told me, in an email in October of 2023, hatch. I know it was a violation. I would do it again. The Dutch commands were for work. The Polish words were for him to know that when I used them, I was not on duty. I was just me. He needed to know the difference. He had been a piece of equipment for 2 years before he met me. I wanted him to know he was a dog too. The Polish was for the dog part. She and Vex were posted to Camp Lejeune in 2016. They did 1 deployment in 2016-17, 8 months to Djibouti, supporting Combined Joint Task Force, Horn of Africa, standard base security work. 2 minor incidents. 1 explosive detection at a vehicle checkpoint. 1 apprehension of a perimeter intruder who turned out to be a local goat herder who had gotten lost. Nothing dramatic. Janik was promoted to sergeant in March of 2017. She was promoted to staff sergeant in October of 2017, which is fast. 18 months from sergeant to staff sergeant is in the top quartile for MWD handlers. In January of 2018, she received a notification through her chain of command that she had been selected for attachment to Marine Special Operations Team 23, MARSOC, for a deployment to Syria scheduled to begin in October of 2018. The deployment was 9 months. Her job would be to provide K9 support for direct action missions in support of Operation Inherent Resolve, specifically against remaining ISIS pockets in the Middle Euphrates River Valley. This was not a normal assignment. MARSOC, the Marine Corps' Special Operations component, had historically been slow to integrate working dogs into direct action teams. The reasoning was operational. Dogs are noisy on insert. They require additional logistics. They are an additional casualty risk, and operators are protective of their teams and skeptical of attached personnel they did not select themselves. By 2018, MARSOC had begun experimentally attaching MWDs to certain teams for certain mission profiles, but the program was new and the operators were, in many cases, openly hostile to it. Janik knew this. She had been briefed by her first sergeant, Devereaux. Devereaux told her, in his office at Camp Lejeune in February of 2018, Janik, I am going to tell you the truth. You are walking into a unit that does not want you. They specifically did not want a K9. They were told they were getting one. The team sergeant on the receiving end is a master sergeant named Devereaux. Mark Devereaux, 18 years in, 2 MARSOC deployments, 3 previous deployments in reconnaissance. He is one of the most respected operators in MARSOC. He is also, I am told, of the opinion that K9s are a liability on direct action work. He has said so publicly. He is going to be your team sergeant. Are you prepared for that? Janik said, First Sergeant. I am prepared for anything except him hurting the dog. Devereaux said, He will not hurt the dog. He is not that kind of man. He is the kind of man who will tell you, to your face, that he does not want the dog. He will tell you in language you will not like. But he will not hurt the dog. And if you do your job, he will, eventually, change his mind. I have known Devereaux for 12 years. He is hard. He is fair. He is honest. If you earn it, he will give it to you. If you do not, he will not. That is all. Janik said, Thank you, First Sergeant. Devereaux said, Janik, one more thing. The dog. Vex. He is yours, but he belongs to the Corps. If something happens to him over there, if he is killed, if he is wounded badly enough that he cannot recover, the decision about what to do is not yours. The decision is the veterinary officers and ultimately the team commanders. I want you to know that now. I do not want you to find out in the moment. Do you understand? Janik said, Yes, First Sergeant. I understand. Devereaux said, Good. Dismissed. Janik walked out of his office. She walked to her car. She drove home. She lived, then as now, in the small brick house in Hubert, 15 minutes from the back gate. Vex was in the house. He was, by Lejeune standards, an unusual case. He was authorized to live with his handler off base because Janik had requested it, and because Devereaux had approved it on the grounds that it improved handler-dog bond and operational readiness. The other MWDs on the base lived in the kennels. Vex did not. Janik went into the house. She sat down on the kitchen floor. Vex came over and sat next to her. She put her arm around him. She said, in Polish, Dobry pies. Dobry pies. She sat on the floor for about an hour. Vex did not move. She did not cry. She just sat there with her arm around him. The way you sit with a dog when you have just been told something you have not yet figured out how to feel about. She had 8 months to get ready. She used them well. She and Vex trained, in those 8 months, with 2 different MARSOC support elements at Camp Lejeune and 1 at Fort Bragg. They did helicopter insertions. They did vehicle drills. They did urban environment building clears. They did, at Janik's insistence, extensive drag work practice, the protocol by which a dog physically pulls a downed person out of a hazardous environment. Drag work is not standard MWD training. It is an advanced specialty. Vex was one of maybe a dozen working dogs in the Marine Corps certified for it. Janik wanted him certified deeper. She drilled him on it. She drilled herself on the verbal commands. She drilled both of them on doing it in heat, in smoke, in darkness, with simulated gunfire. She drilled them on doing it when she was injured. She drilled them on doing it when she was not present and only her voice on a radio was guiding him. By October of 2018, when they got on the plane to Syria, there was almost no scenario in which Vex did not know what to do. They landed at a forward operating base in the eastern Deir ez-Zor province in the first week of October. The base was small, maybe 200 personnel. Hesco walls, a handful of buildings, a helicopter pad, a chow tent, an MWR tent with a single television that did not work. Janik and Vex were given a small plywood-walled room near the team's compound. The room had a cot, a footlocker, and a square of plywood on the floor that was intended to be Vex's bed. Vex did not use it. He slept on the cot with Janik. Nobody objected. She met MARSOC Team 23 on her second day on the FOB. The meeting happened at the team's compound gate. It was 0830 local time. The team had returned from an overnight operation about 3 hours earlier, and they were tired, and they were dirty, and they were not in a mood to meet anyone. Master Sergeant Mark Devereaux was 41 years old. He was 6 feet 1 inch tall. He weighed 210 pounds. He had a sand-colored beard that was regulation MARSOC length and a sand-colored crew cut, and the kind of pale blue eyes that, in certain lights, look almost white. He had a tattoo on his right forearm, a date in Roman numerals, with no other context, that he had gotten in 2009 after his first MARSOC deployment, and that he would not, ever, explain to anyone who asked. He had been married once, briefly, in his late 20s. He had no children. He had a yellow Labrador retriever named Hank who lived with his sister in North Carolina and whose photograph was in his wallet behind his ID card, where no one ever saw it. He was standing at the gate of the compound with two other operators behind him when Janik walked up with Vex on a short lead at her left side. She came to attention about 6 feet from him. She said, "Master Sergeant." Staff Sergeant Janik, MWD handler, reporting for attachment to Team 23. Devereaux looked at her. He looked at the dog. He looked at her again. He said, in a flat voice that was not loud and was not unkind, but was also not warm, "Staff Sergeant, put it down, sweetheart. We're not running a petting zoo." He said it once. He did not repeat it. He did not laugh. The two operators behind him did not laugh. Nobody laughed. It was not a joke. It was a statement of position. Janik did not move. She did not break eye contact. She did not look at the dog. She said, in the same flat voice he had used, "Master Sergeant. With respect. He is not in it. He is a he. His name is Vex. He is certified in patrol, explosives detection, and drag work. He is here because he was ordered to be here. So am I. We will try not to get in your way. Permission to take him to our quarters, Master Sergeant." Devereaux looked at her for about 4 seconds. His face did not change. Then he said, "Permission granted. Staff Sergeant." Janik said, "Thank you, Master Sergeant." She turned. She walked back to her quarters with Vex at her left side. She did not look back. She did not speed up. She did not slow down. She walked the way you walk when you have just been told something you already knew you were going to be told, and you have already decided how you are going to respond to it, which is by not responding to it at all. The two operators behind Devereaux watched her go. The one on the left was a gunnery sergeant named Cole Whitford, 36 years old, from Bozeman, Montana, on his third MARSOC deployment. The one on the right was a staff sergeant named Hector Reyes Padilla, 29 years old, from El Paso, Texas, on his first MARSOC deployment. Whitford watched Janik until she rounded the corner of the team compound. Then he turned to Devereaux. He said, in a quiet voice, "Mark." Devereaux said, "Don't." Whitford said, "I'm just going to say one thing, and then I'm not going to say anything else about it for the rest of the deployment." Devereaux said, "Cole." Whitford said, "That was unnecessary." Devereaux did not respond. He stood at the gate for about 10 seconds, looking at the corner where Janik had disappeared. Then he turned and walked back into the compound without speaking. Whitford and Reyes Padilla followed him. Reyes Padilla, who had been in MARSOC for 8 months and who did not yet have the rank to say anything about anything, said nothing. He filed it. Later that night, around 2200, Whitford walked over to Janik's quarters. He knocked on the plywood door. Janik opened it. Vex was behind her on the cot, watching. Whitford stood in the doorway. He did not come in. He said, "Staff Sergeant. Gunnery Sergeant Whitford. I'm Team 23 Sintel Cell Lead. I wanted to introduce myself properly, and I wanted to say what Master Sergeant Devereaux said at the gate this morning. That's not how the rest of the team is going to talk to you. That was him, not us. I want you to know that going in." Janik said, "Gunnery Sergeant. Thank you, but you don't need to apologize for him. He said what he meant. That's information. I'll work with the information." Whitford looked at her for a moment. He said, "Roger that, Staff Sergeant." He looked past her at the dog. He said, "What's his name?" Janik said, "Vex." Whitford said, "Can I?" Janik said, slowly, from the side, "Don't reach over his head." Whitford stepped into the doorway. He moved slowly. He crouched. He held his hand out flat, palm down, at the side of his body, not extended toward the dog. Vex stood up on the cot. He walked to the edge. He sniffed Whitford's hand for about 3 seconds. Then he sat down. His tail moved once. Slow. Whitford said, "Good dog." Janik said, in Polish, very quietly, almost to herself, "Dobry pies." Whitford did not understand the Polish. He stood up. He nodded to Janik. He said, "Staff Sergeant, welcome to Team 23. Anything you need, you ask me, not the team sergeant. For now, we'll work the rest of it out." Janik said, "Roger, Gunnery Sergeant." Whitford left. Janik closed the door. She sat down on the cot next to Vex. She put her hand on his shoulder. She said, in English this time, "Okay, buddy. We're here. We start tomorrow." Vex put his head on her thigh. They sat there for a long time. Janik did not write a letter that night. She did not call home. She did not eat. She just sat with the dog. The plywood walls of the room were thin. Through them, she could hear the FOB at night. Distant generators, a Humvee starting up at the motor pool, someone laughing in the chow tent, the low whump of a helicopter passing somewhere to the south. She listened to it. She filed it. She memorized the sound of the place. The way her father had taught her, without ever saying so, to memorize the sound of a place at night, because the sound of a place at night is the sound of the place when it is being honest with you. That was day 1. I am not going to tell you about every day of the first 3 weeks. I am going to tell you about 3 of them, because 3 of them matter. Day 3. First operational mission. A nighttime vehicle interdiction near a village called Albara, about 40 kilometers northeast of the FOB. Intelligence had indicated a possible weapons cache being moved by truck. Team 23 was tasked with intercepting the truck and clearing it. Janik and Vex were attached for explosives detection. The team rolled out at 0230 in 3 vehicles. 2 MAT Versus and a JLTV. Janik and Vex were in the trail vehicle, the JLTV, driven by Reyes Padilla. Devereaux was in the lead MATV. The interdiction happened at 0347. The truck was stopped on a dirt road 3 kilometers outside the village. The driver, a man in his 50s, was pulled out and detained. The team set up a perimeter. Devereaux, on the radio, said, "K9 to the vehicle. Clear it." This was the first time Devereaux had directly assigned Janik a task on operations. Janik said, "Roger." Moving. She and Vex dismounted. They walked to the truck. Vex worked the vehicle in a standard detection pattern. Exterior first, then bed, then cab. He alerted on the cab, behind the driver's seat. Janik signaled. The team moved in. They found a duffel bag containing approximately 12 kilograms of partially assembled explosive components, deck cord, blasting caps, 2 artillery shells with crude wiring. Enough to make a substantial vehicle-borne IED. Devereaux walked over to the truck. He looked at the duffel bag. He looked at Vex. He looked at Janik. He said, "Good work, Staff Sergeant." He walked away. That was the entire exchange. 3 words. Janik said later, in an email to me, "Hatch." Those 3 words. I've been hoping for them for 48 hours. He said them like he was saying, "Pass the salt." That was on purpose. He wanted me to know he saw the work without making it a big deal. That was the first thing I respected about him. He knew the difference between recognition and theater. Most men in his job do not know the difference. Day 11. A village clearance operation in a place I am not going to name, because the name is still operationally sensitive even 6 years later, and because the family of the village elder who was killed in the operation has not been notified through channels I would be comfortable bypassing. I am going to call it the village. The village was on the western bank of the Euphrates, about 90 kilometers from the FOB. The mission was a multi-house clearance against suspected ISIS leadership. Team 23 was the assault element. Janik and Vex were attached for room clearance support, primarily for detection of booby traps, but also for apprehension if a suspect ran. The operation went largely as planned. 6 houses cleared, 3 suspects detained, 2 booby traps detected by Vex before any operator entered the rooms. 1 a tripwire across a doorway connected to a hand grenade, the other a pressure plate under a rug in a hallway connected to a buried artillery shell. Either one would have killed the lead operator who walked into the room. The lead operator who would have walked into the first room was Gunnery Sergeant Cole Whitford. After the operation, back at the FOB, around 0500, Whitford came to Janik's quarters again. He stood in the doorway again. He said, "Staff Sergeant." Janik said, "Gunnery Sergeant." Whitford said, "That doorway. Tonight. The first one." Janik said, "Yes." Whitford said, "My wife's name is Sarah. We have 2 kids, a boy and a girl. The boy is 7. The girl is 4. The girl's name is Hannah." He stopped. He looked at his boots. He said, "I just wanted you to know their names, so you know who you and your dog kept tonight." Janik said, "Gunnery Sergeant." Whitford said, "That's all. I'm going to bed." He walked away. Janik closed the door. She sat down on the floor next to the cot. Vex slid down off the cot and lay next to her. She put her hand on him. She did not cry. She sat there until the sun came up. She wrote her father a letter that morning. It was the first letter she had written in 3 weeks. It was short. It said, "Dad, I know what you meant about being on the line. I am on it. I will tell you the rest when I come home. Tell Mom I am eating. Tell Babsha, never mind. I forgot. I am sorry. I love you. Carly." She had forgotten, in the moment of writing, that Helena had been dead for over 2 years. She had written "Tell Babsha" automatically, the way you write things to dead people when you are tired and when you have just done something hard and when the part of you that knows the rules of the world is not paying attention. She crossed the line out. She left the cross out visible. She sent the letter that way. Tom Janik, when he received it, in Hamtramck, Michigan, 2 weeks later, sat at the kitchen table and read it 3 times, then folded it carefully, then put it in the small wooden box on top of his dresser where he kept the things he was not going to throw away. He did not show it to Agnieszka. He did not mention it to anyone. He just kept it. The letter is still in that box. I have seen it. He pulled it out in his living room in Hamtramck in November of 2023 when I drove up to interview him for this story, and he handed it to me and said, "Hatch, you can read it. You cannot photograph it. You cannot quote it directly past what I have already told you Carly wrote. That is the deal." I read it. I gave it back. The deal stands. Day 24. This is the day Williams was talking about. Day 24 was a Tuesday. Late October 2018. The mission was a high-value target capture in an urban environment. A small town on the Euphrates, mixed civilian population, ISIS holdouts believed to be using 2 specific buildings as a command node. Team 23 was the assault element. 2 squads of Syrian Democratic Forces partners were providing outer cordon. The target was a man named, I will not name him, but he was on the joint priority target list, and his capture or kill was assessed to be operationally significant. Janik and Vex were attached for entry support. Pre-mission brief, conducted by Devereaux at 1900 the night before, assigned Janik and Vex to the 3rd position in the stack on the primary entry, meaning Vex would clear the entry threshold for booby traps. Then the lead operators would push past and into the structure. This was, by this point, standard procedure for the team. Devereaux had stopped questioning Vex's value about 10 days earlier. He had not said so. He had simply stopped resisting the K9 element in mission planning, and Janik had noticed. The operation began at 0200. The team approached the target building on foot, in two stacks, from two directions. Janik and Vex moved with the primary stack. Devereaux was in the second position behind the breacher. Janik was in third. Vex was on a short lead at her left. At the door, the breacher placed a small charge. He stepped back. He triggered it. The door blew. Vex moved forward to clear the threshold. He was halfway through the doorway when something inside the building moved. What moved was a child. A boy. Maybe 8 years old, maybe 9. He had been asleep on the floor inside the first room. The blast had woken him. He had stood up. He had taken 2 steps toward the door. He was now standing in the entryway, 3 feet from the door, in pajama pants and a dirty t-shirt, with his hands at his sides, looking at a Belgian Malinois that was 4 feet from him in full operational drive. The team's standard procedure in this situation is unambiguous. The dog is recalled immediately. The lead operator enters and controls the child. The child is removed to a holding area. The clearance continues. The total elapsed time should be approximately 4 seconds. What happened instead? Vex stopped at the threshold. He did not bark. He did not advance on the child. He sat down. He did this without a verbal command from Janik. He simply sat. In a working K9, in the middle of a hot entry, with movement detected in the room, a sit without command is essentially impossible. It does not happen. The dog is trained to engage. The dog is in drive. The dog has just heard a breaching charge. The dog should be moving. Vex was not moving. Vex was sitting. Janik, behind him, registered the sit in approximately a quarter of a second. She made a decision in approximately another quarter of a second. The decision was, my dog has seen something I have not seen. Trust the dog, she said, on the team radio, in a voice that was calm and that was loud enough for everyone in the stack to hear. Hold. Hold. Child in the doorway. Vex has it. Hold. Devereaux, behind her, said into the radio, hold. Hold the stack. Janik, talk to me. Janik said, Master Sergeant, there is a child, approximately 8 years old, in the entry, 3 feet from my dog. Vex is in a sit. He is not engaging. The child is not moving. Permission to retrieve the child. Devereaux said, Janik, the stack is hot. We have to push. You have 3 seconds. Get the child clear. Janik said, Roger, 3 seconds. She did not call Vex back. She stepped past Vex into the doorway. She crouched down in front of the child. She did not speak. She held out her arms. The child, who I have to assume had been raised in a war and who knew, in the way that children in wars know things, that a woman with her arms out is a thing you should walk into and not a thing you should run from, walked into her arms. She picked him up. She turned. She handed him backward, over Vex, to Reyes Padilla, who had moved up from the second stack to receive him. Reyes Padilla took the child and moved him to the outer cordon. Total elapsed time, from breach to child clear, approximately 6 seconds. The team pushed. They cleared the building. The high-value target was not in the building. He had been in the second building, the one the second squad was hitting. He was captured by them, alive, with no casualties on either side. Total mission duration, 41 minutes. In the after-action review, conducted back at the FOB at 0700 that morning, Devereaux walked through the operation room by room. When he got to the entry on the primary target building, he said, K9 sit at threshold. Janik called hold. We held. Child cleared in approximately 6 seconds. Mission delayed by approximately 3 seconds total. Outcome, no civilian casualties, no friendly casualties. Target acquired by Element 2. Element 1 entry sequence. Concur. He moved on to the next phase. He did not single out Janik. He did not single out Vex. He did not mention the sit. He folded the entire incident into the routine summary of the operation. as if it had been planned, as if the dog sitting at the threshold of a hot breach in the presence of an enemy child was a normal procedural outcome and not an anomaly that, in fact, did not exist in any MWD training manual published by the United States Department of Defense. After the AAR, the team dispersed. Janik walked back to her quarters. Devereaux walked to his. About 40 minutes later, around 0815, Devereaux knocked on Janik's plywood door. Janik opened it. Vex was on the cot. Devereaux was holding 2 paper cups of coffee from the chow tent. He held one out to her. He said, "Staff Sergeant, may I come in for a minute?" Janik said, "Yes, Master Sergeant." Devereaux stepped inside. He handed her the coffee. He did not sit down. There was nowhere to sit except the cot, and the cot had Vex on it. He stood. He looked at Vex for a moment. Then he looked at Janik. He said, "The sit. At the threshold. Did you train that?" Janik said, "No, Master Sergeant." Devereaux said, "He did it on his own." Janik said, "Yes, Master Sergeant." Devereaux said, "Has he done it before?" Janik said, "No, Master Sergeant." Devereaux was quiet for a moment. He said, "Staff Sergeant, I want to ask you a question, and I want you to answer it honestly. If I had ordered you to recall the dog and push the stack, which would have been within standard procedure and which I would have been within my authority to do, what would have happened?" Janik said, "Master Sergeant, I would have recalled the dog." Devereaux said, "And then," Janik said, "and then I would have stepped into the doorway in front of the lead operator and I would have picked up the child myself. It would have taken approximately the same 6 seconds. The stack would have held the same. I would have been written up for breaking the entry sequence, and I would have accepted the write-up. The child would have lived either way." "Master Sergeant." Devereaux looked at her for a long moment. He nodded slowly. He said, "That is what I thought you were going to say. I want you to know I appreciate the honesty. I also want you to know that if the dog had not sat, if you had been the one making that call without his cover, I would have written you up. I would have had to. And then I would have walked it back through every channel I had. And I would have probably lost the walk back. And you would have been on a plane home by the end of the week. The dog saved both of us. From different things. Do you understand?" Janik said, "Yes, Master Sergeant." Devereaux said, "What's his name again?" Janik said, "Vex, Master Sergeant." Devereaux walked to the cot. He crouched down. He did not reach for the dog. He held his hand out, palm down, at the side of his body. He said, "Hey, Vex." Vex stood up on the cot. He walked to the edge. He sniffed Devereaux's hand for about 4 seconds. Then he sat down. His tail moved once. "Slow-lo." Devereaux said, "Good dog." He stood up. He turned to Janik. He said, "Carly. I'm going to call you Carly when it's just us. Is that okay?" Janik said, "Yes, Master Sergeant." Devereaux said, "Call me Mark when it's just us. Don't do it in front of the team. We'll keep the rank in public." Janik said, "Yes, Mark." Devereaux said, "Okay, good. Drink your coffee. We've got another op tomorrow night. Brief at 1900. He walked out. He closed the door behind him. Janik sat down on the cot next to Vex. She drank her coffee. She did not say anything to the dog. The dog did not need to be told. He had figured it out before she had. I am going to slow down now, because we are coming to the day, and the day deserves slowness. Day 35 of the deployment. November 16th, 2018. A Friday. The mission, on paper, was routine. A combat logistics patrol from the FOB to a smaller outpost approximately 70 kilometers to the east, near the Iraqi border. The outpost was a joint Syrian Democratic Forces and U.S. Special Operations site, supporting partner operations in the deep Euphrates Valley. The patrol's task was to deliver ammunition, medical supplies, and a replacement satellite communications antenna. 3 vehicles. Led MATV with 2 operators. Middle MATV, the cargo vehicle, with the supplies, one driver, one passenger. Trail vehicle, the JLTV, with 3 personnel, Reyes Padilla driving, Janik in the right front seat, Vex on the floor at her feet. Devereaux was in the lead MATV, in the right seat. Whitford was driving it. In the cargo MATV were 2 operators I have not introduced. Staff Sergeant Daniel Park, 28, from Oahu, Hawaii, on his second MARSOC deployment, and Sergeant Marcus Eldridge, 25, from Memphis, Tennessee, on his first. Park was driving. Eldridge was in the right seat. Both of them, in approximately 90 minutes, would be unconscious inside a burning vehicle. Both of them would survive. I am telling you that now because I do not want you to spend the next 10 minutes worrying about it. They lived. Hold that. We will earn the rest of it. The patrol departed the FOB at 0530. Sunrise was at 0612. The route was a paved road for the first 30 kilometers, then a graded dirt road for the remaining 40. Standard threat assessment for the route was moderate. ISIS activity in the region had decreased substantially over the previous 6 months, but isolated cells were still capable of small unit ambushes and IED emplacement. The patrol moved at approximately 50 kilometers per hour. Spacing between vehicles was approximately 100 meters. Comms were clean. Weather was clear, cold for the desert at that hour, maybe 8 degrees Celsius, climbing. The sun came up behind them as they drove east. Janik would remember, later, the specific color of the light on the dust on the windshield. She would describe it to me, in an email, as the color of weak tea with too much milk in it. Around 0715, the patrol crossed a low ridge and began to descend into a shallow wadi. The road ran along the wadi floor for approximately 2 kilometers before climbing out the other side. The wadi was approximately 80 meters wide at the bottom. The walls were not steep, maybe 4 meters high on either side, but they were tall enough to provide cover for personnel positioned along the rim. The lead vehicle, with Devereaux and Whitford, was approximately a third of the way through the wadi when the first explosion happened. The first explosion was a buried IED, command detonated, under the cargo MATV, the middle vehicle. The vehicle's armored hull absorbed most of the blast, but the vehicle was lifted approximately 1 meter off the road. The front axle was destroyed, and the engine compartment caught fire. Park, driving, was knocked unconscious by the blast wave. Eldridge, in the right seat, was conscious but had a serious concussion and a fractured left arm. The vehicle came down on its destroyed front axle and slewed sideways, blocking the road. The second explosion, approximately 3 seconds later, was a second IED on the road behind the cargo vehicle, between the cargo vehicle and Janik's JLTV. This one was further from the JLTV and caused no direct damage, but it cratered the road and effectively blocked the JLTV from advancing or retreating past the wreckage. Small arms fire began immediately from both rims of the wadi. The team would later assess the enemy force at approximately 12 to 15 fighters in 2 firing positions, with at least 2 PCAM machine guns and 1 RPG. The RPG was the third event. It was fired from the south rim at the cargo MATV approximately 15 seconds after the initial IED. It hit the rear of the vehicle, penetrated, and ignited the cargo, which included a substantial quantity of small arms ammunition. The cargo compartment began to cook off. The interior of the vehicle filled with smoke and small arms ammunition rounds began discharging in random directions inside the burning hull. Park, unconscious, was in the driver's seat. Eldridge, conscious but disoriented, was in the right seat. A third operator, who I have not mentioned because I am going to mention him now, was in the back of the vehicle, Staff Sergeant Anthony Robles, 31 years old, from Yuma, Arizona, the team's senior medic. Robles had been riding in the cargo compartment because there had not been room for him in the lead MATV and because medics, by long-standing MARSOC custom, ride with the cargo when the team is split. Robles, at the moment the RPG hit, had been adjusting a strap on his medical ruck. The blast threw him forward against the bulkhead behind the driver's seat. He was knocked unconscious. He had a depressed skull fracture on the left side of his head, and he was bleeding heavily into his hair. He was, although nobody in the patrol knew it yet, 90 seconds from dying of an intracranial hemorrhage if no one got him out of that vehicle and onto oxygen. 3 men, 1 unconscious in the front, 1 concussed and conscious in the front, 1 dying in the back, inside a vehicle that was on fire and that was discharging its own ammunition into its own interior. In the lead MATV, Devereaux was on the radio inside of 4 seconds. He called contact. He called grid. He called casualties unknown. He told Whitford to push the lead vehicle forward, out of the kill zone, and turn it broadside to provide a base of fire toward the south rim. Whitford did. The lead MATV's turret gunner, a corporal named Brennan, opened up with the M2 on the south rim positions. The lead vehicle now had cover and could engage, but it could not get back to the cargo vehicle. There were 2 craters and a burning truck between them. In the trail JLTV, Reyes Padilla was already moving. He pulled the JLTV as far forward as the second crater would allow, approximately 40 meters short of the burning cargo vehicle, and stopped. He grabbed his rifle. Janik already had her door open. Vex was already on the ground. Reyes Padilla, on the radio to Devereaux, said, "Trail in position. We have visual on cargo. It is fully involved. Moving to extract." Devereaux, on the radio, said, "Reyes, hold. Hold. We do not know if there are secondaries on the road." Reyes Padilla said, "Master Sergeant, the cargo is cooking. We have maybe 60 seconds. Devereaux said, "I know. Hold. Janik, your dog. Send him forward. Clear the road to the vehicle." Janik, who was already crouched at the front bumper of the JLTV with Vex at her side, said, "Roger. Sending." She gave Vex the command. He moved. He moved low and fast along the right shoulder of the road, the way he had been trained, working the ground for the specific scent signatures of the explosive precursors he was certified on. He covered the 40 meters to the burning vehicle in approximately 15 seconds. He did not alert on any additional devices. He stopped at the rear of the cargo MATV. He sat. He looked back. Janik, on the radio, said, "Road is clear to the cargo. Vex has it clear. Moving." She moved. Reyes Padilla moved with her. They covered the 40 meters in a low run, weapons up, rounds from the north rim now coming in at them. The enemy fighters had identified the new threat and were trying to suppress them. Reyes Padilla took a round through the outer plate of his vest at about the 20-meter mark. The plate stopped it. He did not slow down. They reached the cargo vehicle. Vex was at the rear. The rear door was crumpled but not jammed. Reyes Padilla wrenched it open. The smoke that came out was black and thick, and Janik would tell me later it smelled like a kind of burning she had never smelled before, like rubber and metal and something else, sweet, that I did not understand at the time and that I understood 3 weeks later in the hospital was the sweet smell of skin. Inside the cargo compartment, partially under the displaced medical ruck, was Robles. Reyes Padilla grabbed him under the arms. Janik grabbed his legs. They pulled him out. They dragged him approximately 10 meters to the lee side of the vehicle, where the body of the truck shielded them from the south rim fire. Janik, kneeling next to Robles, said, "He's bleeding from the head. Bad." Reyes Padilla, on the radio, said, "1 casualty extracted. Robles. Head wound. 2 more in the cab. Going back." Devereaux said, "Roger. Move. Reyes Padilla moved back to the cab. The driver's door was jammed. He went around to the passenger side. The passenger door was also jammed, but the window had blown out. Eldridge, inside, was conscious and trying to crawl out. Reyes Padilla grabbed him under the arms and pulled him through the window. Eldridge screamed. His left arm was broken and Reyes Padilla had pulled on it without meaning to. Reyes Padilla said, "Sorry, brother, sorry," and kept pulling. He dragged Eldridge clear and back to where Robles was lying. Eldridge, on the ground, conscious, said, "Park. Park is still in there." Reyes Padilla looked at the cab. The cab was filling with flame now. The interior was orange. The ammunition cook-off was getting worse. Rounds were now punching out through the sidewalls, which meant the cargo compartment temperature had reached the point where the propellant was self-igniting in unfired rounds, which meant the cab was approximately 30 seconds from being uninhabitable by any living thing. Reyes Padilla took 2 steps toward the cab. Janik, behind him, said, "Hector, Hector, stop. Look at it." Reyes Padilla looked at it. He stopped. He said, "I can't get to him." Janik said, "Vex." She gave the command. Drag work. The specific command, in Dutch, that she had drilled with him for 3 years. Vex moved. He went under the truck, between the wheels, on his belly. The side of the vehicle Reyes Padilla could not approach because of the cook-off was the side closest to the driver's door, and came up on the driver's side. The driver's door window was also blown out. Vex jumped. He got his front paws over the window frame. He hooked his teeth into Park's load-bearing harness, on the chest strap where it crossed the sternum, exactly where he had been trained to hook on an unconscious handler. He pulled. Park, 210 pounds of unconscious Marine in body armor, did not move on the first pull. Vex dropped down, repositioned, jumped again, hooked again, pulled again. He moved Park approximately 4 inches. The flames were now licking the back of the driver's seat. The headrest was on fire. Vex's muzzle was at the window frame. The window frame was hot. I do not mean warm. I mean the steel of the window frame was at a temperature that, when Vex's lower jaw contacted it on the 3rd pull, the skin and the fur on his muzzle began to char. Vex did not let go. He pulled a 4th time. Park's body shifted. The harness caught on the seat belt buckle. Vex dropped. He found a new grip, this time on the harness loop at Park's right shoulder. He jumped. He pulled. Park's body cleared the buckle. He pulled again. Park's torso came halfway through the window. Janik was at the side of the truck now, 10 feet away, as close as she could get without being inside the heat envelope. She was screaming the command. She was screaming it in Polish, not Dutch, because the Polish was what came out of her mouth when she could not control what came out of her mouth. Sygnich. Sygnich. Dobry pies. Sygnich. Pull. Pull. Good dog. Pull. Vex pulled. Park's body came through the window. He fell. He landed on the dirt next to the truck. Vex jumped down after him. He grabbed the harness again. He started dragging Park away from the vehicle, on his own, without any further command, the way the protocol said he was supposed to. Pull the body to a distance of at least 20 meters from the hazard. He dragged Park approximately 15 feet, working backward, his paws scrabbling in the dirt, the burned skin on his muzzle leaving small dark smears on the front of Park's vest. Reyes Padilla and Janik were on him in 3 seconds. They took Park from Vex. They dragged him the rest of the way to the cover position. They laid him next to Robles and Eldridge. Janik turned to Vex. Vex was standing. He was not putting weight on his left front paw. The pads on both front paws were sloughing. The skin on his muzzle was black. The fur around his eyes was gone. His left ear was bleeding. He was looking at Janik, waiting for the next command. Janik said, in Polish, Siadaj. Vex sat. Janik said, in Polish, Zekaj. Vex waited. Janik turned to Robles. Robles was the priority. Robles was the one who was going to die in the next 60 seconds if she did not work. She opened her medical kit. She started on him. She did not look at the dog again for the next 4 minutes. The dog sat where she had told him to sit. He did not move. The firefight continued for approximately 11 more minutes. The lead MATV's turret gunner suppressed the south rim. A QRF, called by Devereaux 90 seconds into the contact, arrived from the FOB by helicopter at the 13-minute mark. 2 Black Hawks, one with a medical team, one with a ranger element that swept the rims and confirmed the enemy had broken contact and withdrawn. There were no further friendly casualties. Final enemy assessment was 4 Kia, unknown wounded, the rest exfiltrated. Robles was loaded onto the first medevac at 0741. He was in surgery at the FOB at 0812. He survived. He has a titanium plate in the left side of his skull. He retired from the Marine Corps in 2021 as a gunnery sergeant. He works now as a paramedic in Tucson, Arizona. He has, on the wall of his living room, a framed 8x10 photograph of a Belgian Malinois on a green corduroy couch. The photograph is signed, in pen, on the white border at the bottom. The signature is a paw print. Park was loaded onto the same medevac. He had second-degree burns on approximately 30% of his body, primarily his back and the back of his neck, where the burning seat had been pressed against him. He spent 8 months at the Brooke Army Medical Center burn unit in San Antonio. He is now medically retired. He lives in Maui with his wife. He has a small Hawaiian rescue dog of unknown breed named Vex Jr. He has, tattooed on the inside of his left forearm, a Belgian Malinois in profile with the dates November 16, 2018 underneath. Eldridge was loaded onto the second medevac. His arm was set. His concussion resolved over 6 weeks. He returned to duty. He is still in the Marine Corps. He is now a staff sergeant at Camp Lejeune. He named his daughter, born in 2021, Vexley. His wife was not initially in favor. He talked her into it. He has not, in 6 years, told the story of why to anyone outside the team. He never will. That is fine. The daughter does not need to know. She will know eventually, the way children know things. Vex was loaded onto the second medevac with Eldridge. So was Janik. So was Devereaux. I have to back up by about 90 seconds. At minute 9 of the firefight, while Janik was working on Robles and Vex was sitting beside her not moving, Devereaux made a decision in the lead MATV. The cargo vehicle was now fully consumed. The cook-off was nearly finished, but the south rim fire had repositioned and was now able to range the lee side of the cargo vehicle, the side where Janik and the casualties were. 2 rounds had already cracked into the dirt within 3 meters of Janik's position. The cover was failing. Devereaux told Whitford, "I'm going forward. Keep the gun on the south rim. Tell the QRF to expedite." Whitford said, "Mark." Devereaux said, "Cole, drive the gun. I am going." He got out of the lead MATV. He moved forward on foot, along the same right shoulder route Vex had cleared, approximately 80 meters, under fire the entire way. He took a round in the upper right arm at approximately the 40-meter mark. The round entered just below the shoulder, traveled downward through the deltoid and the upper biceps, exited through the lateral side of the arm, and continued on. It did not hit bone. It did sever the brachial artery and approximately 60% of the biceps muscle. Devereaux did not stop. He covered the remaining 40 meters with his right arm hanging useless at his side, blood pulsing out of the entry wound in a rhythm that the trauma surgeon at the FOB clinic would later describe as the kind of bleed where the patient does not know they are dying yet because the brain has not had time to process it. He reached Janik's position at minute 11. He went to one knee next to her. He said, Carly. Janik looked up from Robles. She saw his arm. She said, Mark. Mark, your arm. Devereaux said, work on him. I'm fine. Janik said, you're not. Devereaux said, Carly, work on him. That is an order. I will sit down. I am sitting down now. He sat down. He sat down in the dirt next to her, with his back against the wheel of the burned cargo vehicle. He reached across his body with his left hand. He pulled his own tourniquet off his vest with his teeth in his left hand. He could not get it onto his right arm one-handed. He held the tourniquet in his teeth and said, around it, Reyes. Reyes Padilla, who was on security 30 feet away, looked back. He saw the arm. He came running. He took the tourniquet. He put it on. He cranked it. The bleeding slowed. Devereaux' face was already gray. Janik finished what she could do for Robles. She turned to Devereaux. She started on his arm. Devereaux said, Carly, the dog. Janik said, he's okay. He's sitting. He's behind you. Devereaux turned his head. Vex was sitting 4 feet away. He had not moved in 14 minutes. His muzzle was black. His ear was bleeding. He was looking at Devereaux. Devereaux said, hey, Vex. Vex's tail moved once. Slow, low. Devereaux said, Carly, when the bird comes, the dog goes on the bird. With Robles. Not on the second one. The first one. Are you hearing me? Janik said, Mark, the first bird is the worst casualty. That's Robles. Devereaux said, I know. The dog goes with Robles. The dog goes first. Are you hearing me? Janik said, Mark, the protocol. Devereaux said, I am the protocol. The dog goes first. I will sign whatever I need to sign. I will tell whoever I need to tell. The dog goes first. He earned the first bird. Tell me you heard me. Janik said, I heard you, Mark. The first medevac landed at 0738. They loaded Robles. Devereaux, sitting against the wheel with his tourniquet arm, said, Carly, the dog. Janik picked Vex up. She tried to. She got him about 2 feet off the ground. She could not lift him cleanly. Vex weighed 70 pounds and Janik weighed 138 pounds, and Vex's left front paw was the one she had to avoid, and she had no good grip on him without hurting him. Devereaux stood up. He should not have stood up. The trauma surgeon would later tell him, in writing, that standing up at that point with that arm and that blood loss was the medical equivalent of flipping a coin and calling it in midair. He stood up anyway. He said, give him to me. Janik said, Mark, no. Devereaux said, Carly, give him to me. She gave him to him. Devereaux took Vex in his left arm. He cradled the dog against his chest, on his left side, the dog's burned paws pointing outward, the dog's head against his neck. He walked. He walked to the helicopter. The helicopter was approximately 800 meters away. It had landed in an open area beyond the wadi, the closest secure LZ. Devereaux walked the entire distance. On one arm, with a tourniquet right arm hanging from his shoulder by what the surgeon would later describe as approximately 3 tendons and a prayer. With 70 pounds of burned Belgian Malinois on his good side. He did not stop. He did not speak. He did not look at anyone who tried to help him. He walked. Janik walked beside him with her rifle. Reyes Padilla walked on the other side with his rifle. They did not touch Devereaux. They did not touch the dog. They walked. The Black Hawk crew chief, watching them come, would tell me later, in a phone call from his current job at a logistics company in Savannah, Georgia, Hatch. I have been in the medevac mission for 9 years. I have seen a lot of things walk up to my bird. I have never seen anything like that man and that dog. He looked like he was already dead and just hadn't gotten the message yet. The dog looked like a piece of charcoal with eyes. He laid the dog down on the deck next to Robles. He stepped back. He did not get on. He said, "Take them." I said, "Sergeant, you're coming too." He said, "No. Next bird." He turned around and walked away. He fell down about 20 feet from the bird. We grabbed him. We threw him on. We took off. He was unconscious before the wheels were up. He was, at that moment, approximately 4 minutes from bleeding out. He survived. The arm survived. He has a scar from the top of his shoulder to the middle of his biceps, and he has about 70% function in the arm. He cannot fully extend it overhead, and he cannot do a pull-up. And he was medically reassigned out of MARSOC and finished his career as a senior enlisted advisor at the MARSOC schoolhouse at Camp Lejeune, training the next generation of operators. He retired in 2023 as a sergeant major. He lives now in Sneed's Ferry, North Carolina, in a small house with a fenced yard and the same yellow Labrador retriever named Hank that he had before the deployment. Hank is now 13. Hank is going to die soon. Devereaux knows it. He has not yet decided what he will do after. Vex survived too. You already know that. He went to Lackland. He was on the table for 8 hours. He had 3 more surgeries over the following 6 months. The intake document I read to you at the beginning of this episode was written by a veterinary technician who is asked not to be named, but who, when I called her in October of 2023 to ask if I could read her words on air, said, "Hatch, read it. Read every word." I wrote it flat because I had to. Read it the way I wrote it. The people listening will hear what I meant. Vex was officially retired from the Marine Corps on May 14, 2019, 4 years to the day after he met Janik at Lackland. He was formally adopted by Staff Sergeant Carolina Janik on the same day. The adoption paperwork was processed without fee because the Lackland kennel master at the time was Gunnery Sergeant Reyes, who had been the one who paired them in 2015 and who wrote on the adoption form, in the comments section, "This dog was always hers." The paperwork is a formality. Janik finished her enlistment. She was promoted to Gunnery Sergeant in 2021. She declined a re-enlistment bonus and an assignment to Lackland as an MWD school instructor. She separated from the Marine Corps in May of 2022, 8 years to the month after she enlisted. She works now as a civilian canine trainer for a small private contractor that supplies detection dogs to county sheriff's departments in eastern North Carolina. She makes less money than she would have made staying in. She does not care. She lives in the brick house in Hubert. She has the green corduroy couch. She is Vex. She has, since 2021, a second dog, a young Malinois named Sock, which is Polish for juice, because, Janik told me, he is full of it. Sock is in training. Vex tolerates him. Sock worships Vex. Tom Janik retired from the Detroit Public Safety Dispatch in 2018, 3 weeks before the ambush. He did not learn about the ambush for 9 days, because the casualty notification process for non-fatal injuries is slower than the process for fatalities, and because Janik specifically requested that her parents not be notified until she could call them herself. When she did call them, on day 10, from a phone in the ICU waiting room at the Landstuhl Regional Medical Center in Germany, where Devereaux was recovering, she told her father everything. She talked for 40 minutes. Tom did not interrupt. When she was done, Tom said, "Kiddo, you did the job. You were on the line. You did the job." That was all he said. Agnieszka, on the other line, was crying quietly. Tom said, "Aga, she did the job. Let her hear that." Agnieszka said, in Polish, "Carolina, I love you. Come home." Janik said, "I will, Mama. Soon." Tom Janik died in March of 2023 of pancreatic cancer, 11 months after his diagnosis. Carolina was with him at the end. Vex was with her. The hospice nurse permitted it. Tom, in his last lucid hour, looked at the dog on the floor beside his bed and said, in English, "That dog. Carly, that dog stayed." Carolina said, "Yes, Dad. He stayed." Tom said, Babsha would have liked that. Carolina said, "She did, Dad. She met him. Remember?" Tom said, "I remember." He closed his eyes. He died about 90 minutes later. Vex did not move from the floor beside the bed for any of it. Agnieszka lives now with her sister in Warsaw. She moved back to Poland in the summer of 2023. She calls Carolina every Sunday. She asks every time, "How is the dog?" Carolina says every time, "He is good, Mama. He is sleeping on the couch." Agnieszka says every time, in Polish, "Dobry pies." Now, the ribeye. Every November. On the 15th, Mark Devereaux drives from Sneed's Ferry, North Carolina, to Hubert, North Carolina. The drive is, by the most direct route, 23 minutes. He does not take the most direct route. He drives north first, to a butcher shop in New Bern that he has been going to since 2019, run by a man named Tomasz Wojcik, who immigrated from Krakow in 1994. He buys one ribeye, bone-in, 2 inches thick, approximately 1.5 pounds. He pays cash. Tomasz, who knows by now what the ribeye is for, wraps it in butcher paper and then in a second layer of brown paper, and then puts it in a small cooler with 2 ice packs. Tomasz does not charge him for the second layer of paper. He does not charge him for the ice packs. He has not charged him for either since 2020. Tomasz says, "Every year. For the dog, yes." Devereaux says, "Every year. For the dog." Tomasz nods. He hands him the cooler. He does not say anything else. He has, behind the counter, a small framed photograph of his own dog from his childhood in Krakow, a black mongrel named Saigon who died in 1988. He does not show the photograph to Devereaux. He does not need to. They understand each other without it. Devereaux drives from New Bern to Hubert. The drive takes about 40 minutes. He listens to nothing. The radio is off. He drives with his left hand on the wheel because his right arm still does not extend properly to 10 o'clock, and because, after 5 years, the habit of driving one-handed is now permanent. He arrives at Janik's house at approximately 1700. He parks on the gravel in front of the house. He gets out. He carries the cooler to the front door. He does not knock. He has not knocked since 2021. The door is unlocked. He opens it. He goes in. Vex is on the green corduroy couch. He has been on the green corduroy couch since approximately 1400, when Janik moved him there from the rug in the kitchen, where he had been since 0700, when she carried him out of the bedroom. He is 6 years and 7 months old. He is, by veterinary assessment, in the last year of his life, possibly the last 6 months. His muzzle, where the burned skin healed, is permanently white. His left front paw is missing 2 toes. His left ear is folded over and does not stand up. He cannot walk more than approximately 30 meters without resting. He cannot climb stairs. He sleeps approximately 20 hours a day. He still recognizes commands. He still wags his tail. He still leans into a hand when a hand is offered. He is, by any reasonable measure, an old dog who was once a young dog who did one impossible thing on one morning in a country he did not understand, for reasons he did not understand, on behalf of people whose names he did not know. He looks up when Devereaux comes in. His tail moves once. Slow. Devereaux says, "Hey, Vex." Janik comes out of the kitchen. She is wearing jeans and a faded gray sweatshirt that says Hamtramck on it in cracked white letters. She is 30 years old. She has Sock at her side. Sock, the young Malinois, 3 years old now, all muscle and motion and bright black eyes, who comes to a stop the moment he sees Devereaux and who sits, automatically, without being told, because he has been raised in a house where Devereaux is a person you sit for. Janik says, "Mark." Devereaux says, "Carly." She takes the cooler from him. She carries it to the kitchen. He follows her. Sock follows them both. Vex stays on the couch. He has stopped following anyone anywhere unless he has to. He watches them go. He knows what the cooler means. He has known what the cooler means for 5 years. In the kitchen, Janik opens the cooler. She takes out the ribeye. She unwraps the brown paper. She unwraps the butcher paper. She puts the ribeye on a wooden cutting board that her father gave her in 2014 before she shipped to Lackland, and that she has used for everything important that has happened in her kitchen since then. She lets the ribeye come to room temperature. While it warms, she pours 2 glasses of bourbon, Buffalo Trace, neat, the same brand they have been drinking together on this day since the 2nd year. Because in the 1st year they drank whatever Janik had in the house, which was a bottle of Polish vodka her mother had given her, and Devereaux had said, kindly, "Carly, this is going to give us both a headache." And the next year he had brought the bourbon, and they have drunk it ever since. She hands him a glass. They do not toast. They have never toasted. They have, in 5 years, never said the words to each other about why they are doing this. The not saying is part of the doing. They drink. They stand in the kitchen. They do not speak for about 2 minutes. Then Devereaux says, "How's he been?" Janik says, "Tired. He had a hard week. The vet came Tuesday." She said maybe 6 months. Maybe less. Devereaux says, "Carly." Janik says, "I know." Devereaux says, "You'll call me." "When?" Janik says, "I'll call you." Devereaux says, "I want to be here. If you want me here." Janik says, "I want you here." That is the entire exchange about it. They drink. They do not say anything else about it. They will not say anything else about it until the day comes. And on the day, they will not need to say anything either, because the saying has already been done in advance in this kitchen with this bourbon on this day every November for 5 years. She heats a cast iron pan. She salts the ribeye. She does not pepper it. Vex does not like pepper, has never liked pepper, sneezed at it the one time she tried it in 2019, and she has never used it since. She sears the ribeye, 2 minutes per side, on high heat. She moves it to the oven. She finishes it at 400 degrees for approximately 6 minutes, until the internal temperature reaches 125 degrees Fahrenheit, which is medium rare for a human and which is, for a dog who has lost most of his teeth on the right side and who has trouble chewing anything too rare or too cooked, exactly correct. She takes it out. She lets it rest for 10 minutes. While it rests, Devereaux carries his bourbon into the living room. He sits down on the floor next to the couch, on the rug, with his back against the couch and his bad arm resting on his knee. Vex, on the couch, shifts his head approximately 2 inches so that his nose touches Devereaux's shoulder. Devereaux does not move. He sits. He drinks. He puts his good hand, his left hand, up onto the couch behind him, and he rests it on Vex's flank, very lightly. The way you rest your hand on something that you are not sure how many more times you will get to rest your hand on. He says, quietly, to the dog, "Hey, buddy." Vex's tail moves once. Slow. Devereaux says, "You're the best dog. You know that. You're the best dog there's ever been." Vex does not move. He breathes. His breathing is shallow now, the way old dogs breathe when they are conserving. Devereaux can feel it under his hand. Devereaux says, "You pulled him out, buddy. You pulled him out, and you didn't let go. I think about it every day. I want you to know I think about it every day. I don't know if you remember it. I hope you don't. But I do. I remember it for both of us." Vex does not move. Sock, on the floor across the room, watches them both. Sock has been told, by Janik, in Polish, to stay. Sock stays. Sock understands, in the way a young Malinois understands things, that this is not his moment. He waits. Janik brings the ribeye in. She has cut it, on the wooden board, into pieces approximately 1 inch square, small enough for Vex to manage with his bad teeth, large enough that the eating is real, that it takes time, that it is a meal and not a snack. She sets the board on the coffee table. She sits down on the floor on the other side of the couch, so that Vex is between them. She picks up the first piece of meat. She holds it out. Vex lifts his head. He takes the meat from her fingers. Very gently. He chews on the left side of his mouth, which is the side that still has teeth. He swallows. He looks at her. She gives him the next piece. She does this for about 15 minutes. Piece by piece. She does not rush. He does not rush. Devereaux, on the other side, does not eat any of it. He never eats any of it. The ribeye is not for him. He sits with his hand on Vex's flank, and he watches the dog eat the meat the way a man watches a thing that he loves do a thing that the thing loves to do, knowing that the watching is the point, and that the meat is the medium, and that all of it, the drive, the butcher in New Bern, the brown paper, the bourbon, the cast iron pan, the 15 minutes of 1-inch squares, all of it is, in the end, the only language any of them have for what happened in the Wadi on November 16, 2018, which cannot otherwise be spoken about, ever, by any of them, without breaking something in all of them that has been carefully, painfully, deliberately not broken for 5 years. When the ribeye is gone, Janik sets the empty board on the coffee table. She wipes her fingers on a napkin. She picks up her bourbon. She drinks. She says, "Mark." Devereaux says, "Yeah." She says, "Thank you for coming." Again, Devereaux says, "Carly, I will come every year, until I cannot. And then my sister will bring the dog. Hank will not be here much longer either. But there will be a dog. There will always be a dog. And whoever the dog is will come with whoever can drive. That is the deal. I am telling you the deal now, so you know." Janik says, "I hear you." Devereaux says, "Good." They sit there. Vex sleeps. His breathing slows further. He is not dying tonight. That comes later, in March of 2025, on a Tuesday morning, in this same living room, on this same couch, with this same woman beside him and the same man on the floor with his hand on his flank. Having been called the day before, and having driven up the night before, and having slept on the floor next to the couch all night, because Vex could no longer get down off the couch on his own, and Devereaux did not want him to wake up alone. But that is a different episode. That is, possibly, an episode one will not make, because some things should stay in the room they happened in. We will see. For tonight, in November of 2023, Vex is asleep. Janik is on one side of him. Devereaux is on the other. Sock is on the rug across the room, finally allowed to relax, lying on his side with his eyes half closed, watching the three of them the way the next dog always watches the current dog, with patience, with respect, with the dim understanding that he is being trained, in this moment, in the only thing that matters, which is how to be the dog who stays. Outside, in the gravel driveway, Devereaux's truck cools in the November dark. Inside, the cast iron pan cools on the stove. The bourbon bottle is on the counter, capped. The 2 glasses are on the coffee table, mostly empty. The wooden cutting board has a small dark stain in the center where the juice from the ribeye soaked into the grain. The stain has been there, in increasing layers, for 5 years. Janik will not sand it out. She will, when the board finally cracks, retire it to a shelf and use a new one. The old one will go in the same wooden box on the same dresser where Tom Janik kept his daughter's letter from Syria. The box now lives in Carolina's bedroom. It contains the letter, a photograph of Helena in her chair on the 2nd floor of the house on Caniff Street, a small worn dog collar with a brass tag that reads Bruno, and, eventually, the cutting board with the stain. That is the kitchen. That is the ribeye. That is the 15th of November. I want to tell you one more thing, and then I will let you go. When I called Carolina Janik in October of 2023 to ask if I could tell this story, She did not say yes right away. She said, Hatch, let me think. She called me back 9 days later. She said, Hatch, you can tell it. I have 3 conditions. The first condition was that I would not use the real names of the village or the high-value target or any operational details that would compromise current activity. I have honored that. The names I have not given you are names I will not give you, ever, on any platform. The second condition was that I would call Mark Devereaux first and ask him directly, and that if he said no, I would drop the story. I called him. He said, Hatch, Carly wants it told. Tell it. I have one rule. Do not make me sound like a hero. I was the team sergeant. I did my job. The dog is the hero. Janik is the hero. The rest of us were doing what we get paid to do. If you make me sound like a hero, I will never speak to you again, and Carly will be mad, and the dog will know. I have tried. I do not know if I have fully succeeded. I have tried. The third condition was the hardest. The third condition was, Hatch, do not end the story with the ambush. End it with the kitchen. End it with the ribeye. End it with the part where nothing is happening, because that is the part that matters. The part where nothing is happening is the part that is the story. The ambush is the reason. The kitchen is the story. Do you understand? I told her I understood. I am not sure I did when she said it. I think I understand it now. What I think she meant is this. The world will, sometimes, ask you to do an impossible thing. You will do it or you will not. If you do it, you will not remember most of it accurately, because the body that does impossible things is not the body that builds memories. Those are 2 different bodies operating on 2 different clocks, and the one that does the doing finishes its work and goes silent and leaves the remembering to a body that wasn't there. So you will not, in the end, own the impossible thing the way you think you will. It will live somewhere outside of you, in other people's accounts and in paperwork and in a scar on someone's arm and in a tattoo on someone's forearm and in a daughter named Vexley who does not yet know why. What you will own is the kitchen. What you will own is the ribeye. What you will own is the 15 minutes of 1-inch squares and the hand on the flank and the slow, low single wag of a tail and the not saying of the thing that does not need to be said, because the doing of the small thing every year on the same day is itself the saying. That is what you get to keep. That is the only thing the impossible thing gives back to you, in exchange for everything it took. That is what I think she meant. I asked her one more question on that 9 days later phone call. I asked her, Carly, why November 15th? The ambush was the 16th. Why do you do it the day before? She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Hatch, because on the 15th, he was still whole. On the 15th, he had not been burned yet. On the 15th, he did not know he was going to have to do what he did. We celebrate him on the day he was still a dog who didn't know. Because that is the dog I want him to remember being. Not the dog who pulled Park out. The dog before. The dog who was just a dog. She paused. She said, Hatch, does that make sense? I told her it did. I am Hatch Caro. This has been volume 45. The dog's name was Vex. He is still alive as of this recording. If you want to send him something, don't. He has everything he needs. He has a couch. He has a woman. He has a man who drives up every November with a ribeye. He has a young dog watching him from across the room, learning. That is the entire list. That is the whole thing. I will see you next month. Stay on the line.